Here we are with our councils, city managers, directors, and staff. And I know you guys have put a lot of work into the budget items that you're going to be presenting us today. As we know, these are just rare, and I refuse from now to the rest of my life to say unprecedented, but these are certainly unusual and rare times. And this pandemic has created many fiscal and operational challenges for us as the city. Today, we're in the midst of putting together an operational budget and somewhat blind because we don't know all the implications or all the information that we have had in previous times. But we are charged by charter to come forth with a budget by July 1st. So in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're building this budget to prepare and to sustain operations and service throughout the crisis, while still giving ourselves flexibility to adapt depending on the duration of the financial impacts and the duration of this pandemic. So the budget that we've requested is appropriated, but also flexible. I've asked city manager to give us the schedule to reconvene with staff as council every 3 months or more if necessary to see if we're on target and for income and to see what changes, if any, need to be enacted at that time. So though we're appropriating a budget this year as opposed to other years in particular, the flexibility will allow us to make adjustments and if our income levels are not on target. So throughout the day, our directors in all departments will provide briefings on city operations and future capital improvement projects. We will hear various proposals to address needs throughout the city, to address challenges and discuss impact to current operations. And council, it's my goal today to keep us on target so that we do give clear direction to city manager and staff. And if that means that in our conversation, if I need to pause us to get direction from council as a whole, then I will do so like we did last night on individual items. And at this point, I will hand it over to our city manager.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Seems like we were just here. Okay. All right, Mayor, Council members, today culminates months of budget preparation for fiscal year 2021, with a complete overhaul of that work over the last 2 weeks due to the current world health challenges that we have been faced with. I would like to begin by thanking the mayor and city council members for your leadership and your commitment to the citizens of Chandler. You have a proven track record of being good stewards of taxpayer dollars while providing for a high quality of life that residents have come to expect in Chandler. I am also committed to present you with a proposed budget that I feel addresses the needs of the community and the desires of the citizens you represent. This next year is going to be very different, as I am recommending a budget based off the best revenue projections that we have today. I certainly realize and understand that we will have to adjust and possibly make some significant decisions in regards to programs and services if these projections do not hold true. Quite frankly, that goes for every year, and we have put a number of policies in place already to assist with the additional monitoring of expenditures as we go forward. I want to thank my entire staff, including the assistant city managers across the way, Don Lang, Management Services Director, Matt Dunbar, our budget manager, and all the budget staff, and the entire executive team for all the extensive contributions made to this year's budget. Mayor and Council, before we get into the proposed budget, I want to discuss a few measures that have already been put in place to keep an even closer eye on our revenues and expenditures going forward. First, what makes Chandler different? Our diversified economy, our strong financial position, our strong reserves, our dedication to a lean organization, our emphasis on great infrastructure, excellent public safety, and our strong quality of life that makes us more competitive for high-paying jobs. Mayor, council members, I am not going into this budget with blinders on. I take the current economic situation very seriously and again realize that we may need to make the changes for the remainder of this year and for fiscal year 2021. I wanted to quickly cover again the measures that are in place to generate one-time savings and additional policies in place to track revenues and expenditures and how we will report those out to you. Expenditure measures that are currently in place include strategically holding vacant positions. This does not mean all positions held, We take extreme pride in our lean workforce, but in times like these, we must look at each and every position closely as to the need. For instance, I am requiring extensive documentation from the directors as to why a position needs to be filled. This includes cost of filling versus not filling in terms of services and possible overtime ramifications of each position. The question will also have to be answered as to what other alternatives they have looked at to change operationally in order to avoid the need for the hire. Holding all travel and remaining training to the end of the calendar year. This will generate one-time savings until we can see what the economy does. We are deferring fleet replacements. The remaining purchase of fleet planned for this fiscal year is being pushed out to next fiscal year, and each and every vehicle will be reevaluated as to the need. Additional scrutiny of all purchases. I have tasked each department director to review all items coming forward to me for council agenda. They must verify that each is absolutely necessary as we go forward. To assist them with that effort, we have created additional reports that will alert them to contractual items set to expire. Last, a strategic prioritization of capital projects. With council input, we will push forward with necessary capital projects and certainly align ourselves for the possibilities of any grant funding across the organization, including the ability to receive additional funding other cities are unable to use. During and immediately after the recession, the city was very fortunate to have projects ready to go or shovel ready, and were able to advance millions of dollars in federal and state funding in construction that also helped to bolster our local economy. Again, additional reports are now available for each department and division to assist with this effort. Mayor and council, as the mayor said, I would like to propose that as we go forward, that a quarterly meeting be held to look at the data as we receive that, and to have discussions regarding our revenues and expenditures. And Mayor, I know you and I discussed August being that first time frame, since that will give us that first quarter of revenue estimates. I will also be sending to council monthly a new form called COVID-19 Revenue Impact Analysis that was created by Dawn and her team. So you'll be able to track monthly along with us what we are seeing for our revenue projections, or actual revenue. Now, for the proposed budget. Our budget theme for fiscal year 2021 is the Futures in Sight. This budget that I am presenting to you today continues Chandler's tradition of building a budget based on solid fiscal foundations. The proposed budget is the result of department directors and their teams reviewing and prioritizing services provided and capital projects planned based on the council's strategic policy goals, as well as additional guidance from council budget kickoff in December and your budget workshops number 1 and number 2. We engage citizens year-round and again when formulating the budget. During the year, numerous opportunities to obtain input transpired, and during the budget process, citizen input was received through a successful citizen budget survey. The survey reflected overall high scores on city government performance, quality of life, and the great return on my tax dollars. The Mayor's Budget Live virtual community meeting was also a success. We continue to provide cost-effective quality services. Department directors and their staff are always looking at ways of being more efficient while improving services. This proposed budget reflects Chandler's continued commitment to listen to our citizens and provide the highest quality services in the most cost-effective manner, while maintaining the city's long-term financial sustainability. We have built this budget on relying on council's vision of maintaining that long-term financial sustainability. The city's AAA general obligation bonds were reaffirmed by all 3 rating agencies, making Chandler one of the very few cities in the United States to achieve these ratings. We continue to adhere to the city's 9 strong financial policies established by mayor and council, which were formalized through a resolution of council in 2016, updated in 2017, and number 9 was added just last year. And finally, this proposed budget is structurally balanced, meaning only using ongoing revenue for ongoing expenditures and one-time revenue for one-time expenditures. With that, I am happy to present to you the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget at a total of $901 million, which is 2.8% less than the current fiscal year. The council's strategic policy goals continue to build on the vision of its leaders. They maintain fiscal sustainability and provide great value to our citizens with conservative planning and forward thinking. The budget has incorporated many items that are in line with the goals of council, as you will see throughout the day in both operating and capital budgets. Here are some of the highlights. First, this proposed budget embodies the goal of maintaining fiscal sustainability by managing expenditure growth to keep the cost of services low. There is funding support the goal of being the most connected city through technology improvements and infrastructure, including citywide technology infrastructure upgrades, updating Wi-Fi access points, continuing to enhance our mobility, and expanding many of our arterial streets in the southeast part of the city and the public transportation networks based on the recently approved Master Transportation Plan. We continue to be a leader in trust and transparency by providing timely and accurate data and encouraging citizen engagement for a variety of events and activities. The budget survey helped us validate citizen concerns were being addressed today and in the future. Attracting a range of private sector businesses is very important for our city, and everything we do goes into providing the infrastructure, amenities, and safety that businesses are looking for when they are making decisions as to where to locate their business. Included in the proposed budget is funding for downtown redevelopment and economic development programs, funding for projects such as Phase 1 of Alma School Road, the Gilbert Road widening and widening of Ocotillo, Chandler Heights, and Lindsay Roads that will help support development in the upcoming year. Fostering a contemporary culture that embraces unity is very important to our community, and you will find requests for funding for events like Jazz Festival in Center Park, as well as other events such as Tumbleweed Tree Lighting and the Multicultural Festival. The budget includes needed upgrades for Center for the Arts. The budget includes a host of ongoing and one-time funding for the maintenance of city infrastructure to keep our city safe and beautiful. As discussed during the budget kickoff, there is a need to put a higher emphasis on maintenance of our existing infrastructure such as streets, utilities, parks, and facilities as we look to the future and strive to improve the quality of life for our citizens. Formulating the fiscal plan for each year comes with numerous challenges and opportunities, and certainly this year was no different. The economy has had its long period of growth in history, and prior to the COVID-19 financial losses, we had already included projections for a downturn in the current budget. Maintaining service levels and quality infrastructure in the most cost-effective way is vital. This year included diligent monitoring of legislative bills that could impact our ongoing revenues, as well as focused review of expenditure impacts that are or potentially could cause higher costs if not contained. A budget kickoff with Mayor and Council in December of 2019 included conversation on items such as the PSPRS rates and related unfunded liability, state-required minimum wage increases, retirement vacancies, workers' compensation self-insurance claims, aging infrastructure, and addressing various capital needs under a higher cost environment. The proposed 2021 budget is 6% less than the fiscal year as general merits and markets have been adjusted, the vacancy savings rate has been increased, a number of decision packages were removed, contingencies and reserves were adjusted, and the council amendment reserve was removed. Per our discussion at Budget Workshop number 2, an additional payment to the Public Safety Retirement System for $15 million has also been included and will be held until we are sure revenues are coming in. Long-term operating forecast manages costs with little to no revenue growth and a potential economic downturn. Highlights include a proposed slight reduction, 0.008, in the city property tax rate that will help to minimize the 7.7 increase in limited assessed values. We are doing all of this while maintaining existing service levels. Significant review within departments to bring forward the highest priority was accomplished. All of these show up in the budget book. Once the COVID pandemic hit, decision packages were then heavily scrutinized, and ultimately 25 decision packages were removed and many others modified. Ultimately, this budget includes ongoing decision packages totaling $1 million and one-time packages of $4.1 million in funding for a total of $5.1 million to the general fund and $2.3 million to all other funds. This includes adding 2 positions overall with both general fund police department. Existing budget reallocations of nearly $790,000 were identified to help fund new operation and maintenance needs as shown on page 45 of the budget highlights section. The proposed budget adds funding for employee compensation, including a combination of merit and association commitments. Additionally, this budget maintains strong reserves, including the 15% general fund contingency reserve and the $10 million budget stabilization reserve. As I mentioned, the operating budget continues the plan to reduce the city's PSPRS unfunded liability debt, thereby reducing our employer rates sooner. The budget adds an increased amount of $15 million in one-time funding towards the paydown of PSPRS liability. Mayor and Council, I'm happy to report that we have no projected change to the transaction privilege tax rates, water, wastewater, solid waste, or reclaimed water rates. And Chandler now has the lowest average residential utility, water, wastewater, and solid waste rates compared to the other Valley cities. And I just want to thank John Knutson and his team for making this happen. Fiscal year 2021 budget adds 2 FTEs for all funds, both in general funds. The new positions include 1 police commander, which has been unbudgeted since fiscal year 15-16 and has been covered with one-time salary savings, and 1 police school resource officer, which will be partially funded with school district grant money. One of the ways we measure the size of our workforce is the number of employees per 1,000 in population. This chart shows that even with the addition of 2 positions, there was a reduction from this current year of 6.5 employees per 1,000 to now 6.4 employees per 1,000 for fiscal year 2021. It is interesting to note that in 2000-2001, we were at 7.4 employees per 1,000 population. We have been successful in becoming more efficient over time. In addition, we are the second lowest compared to other Valley cities in fiscal year 19-20 or their current budgets. This may change in 2021 as COVID-19 impacts may force some communities to lay off personnel. As we look to Chandler's future and strive to improve the quality of life for our citizens, it is vital that we continue to provide well-designed and maintained infrastructure and amenities. The total capital budget for fiscal year 2021 is increasing by 2.9%, $9.9 million for new and continuing projects compared to the current year, with a higher emphasis on maintenance. The amount of the 10-year proposed 2020-2029 CIP is $1.16 billion, which is $227 million or 24% more than the prior 10-year plan. This CIP continues Mayor and Council priorities of maintaining existing infrastructure, finishing planned construction of parks and southeast arterial streets, limiting new projects that add operations and maintenance, and addressing public need. The plan also puts a higher emphasis on maintaining those aging streets, parks, utilities, facilities, and technology infrastructure, as well as adding new requested projects such as Alma School Road, Veterans Memorial Park Phase 2, the first phase of Lantana Ranch Park, and the airport runway extension, just to name a few. With the completion of several facility and equipment studies of our water and wastewater facilities, additional maintenance of these existing infrastructure was identified as a significant need, and those projects have also been added to the capital plan. Management Services continues to ensure maximum savings through bond refundings, and we continue to minimize the secondary tax rate, maintaining our AAA bond ratings. The 10-year capital plan does not project any increases to the secondary tax rate, although bond sales are anticipated. I also want to point out that it will take a voter-authorized bond election to sustain this 10-year plan. Without a bond election, many of these projects will have to be removed. Mayor and Council, it is the goal of this budget to not only look at next fiscal year, but to look at the future financial stability of the city by taking measures now to ensure the short and long-term viability of the organization. With the continued tradition of transparency, strong financial policies, continued efficiencies, funding essential services, and maintaining infrastructure, I feel this budget aligns with the vision set by Mayor and Council. I am pleased to report that we do have the future in sight in Chandler, even with the large bump in the road we're currently experiencing. Fiscal year 2021 will be a difficult year to navigate, but Chandler is definitely up to the task. At this time, I would like Don Lang, our Management Service Director, to begin the day. Don.
Mayor. Councilmember Orlando, and then if anyone else has comments or questions. Councilmember.
So we went by that real quick. Couple things on the reduction for the general fund. What were those percentages and the dollar amounts?
And I think Don's going to cover that again as well.
we're gonna get deeper into that.
Yeah,
All
in
right.
the next section. Do you want me to repeat those or let Dawn?
Oh, that's fine, I'll wait. And then, Dawn, as we go through this, I know we're only adding 2 this fiscal year, but how many bodies did we add on the 1920 additional bodies?
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, it was about 5.4 positions in the 1920 budget.
Okay, so those were added, and then obviously those will be carried over to this year.
Correct.
Okay.
They have been added. We're not, so far, not recommending any reductions in FTEs, but depending on revenues, excuse me, that may have to change. That will be discussed with mayor and council.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Council, any other questions? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Marcia. That was very thorough, and thanks for that. You mentioned something about a bond, and I know there's a lot of things we're going to be talking about today. For us to continue our capital improvement program, you suggested that a bond would have to be initiated by council. Does that mean, you're not suggesting that for this fiscal year? You're saying down the road, like we wouldn't want to tax people higher at this point with everything going on, would we?
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, you are correct. I was discussing the 10-year plan. So in order to get all of the projects that are currently listed in that 10-year plan, it will take a voter-authorized bond election. So the voters would actually have to vote themselves that tax increase. But we had discussed that, and at least the last direction is to move forward to put together a committee to take a look at a possible bond election. But there's nothing that would impact next year's capital plan.
And we're going to probably discuss a lot of things today that we've talked about in the past. So just for clarity, because this is in public, you're not talking about this year, you may not be talking about next year, but it could be 5 years down the road. It's just when I hear bond, I hear tax increases at a time when we don't need that.
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, we are not proposing any tax increases, and quite the opposite. We're proposing a reduction to the primary property tax rate with this budget.
Thank you.
All right, please proceed.
And there'll be more information later regarding bond authorization, so we'll even talk more. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Marcia. I did want to mention before I jump into some of the detail here that this is broadcast today, but the slides themselves are available online on chandleraz.gov/budget if you want to go back and refer to those for anyone that may be watching. So as Marcia mentioned, much work and rework and numerous public opportunities for input have gone into the preparation of the proposed 2021 budget. Today's full-day budget briefing represents the last scheduled day to openly discuss the recommended operating and capital budget based on our timeline to ensure adoption by the beginning of our fiscal year, July 1st. We will then begin a very unique year in Chandler's history. So just to go a little bit deeper, I know Marcia also discussed the budgeting approach to COVID-19, but for the last 10 years, our economy has been strong, and every year the city has grown its tax base, managed increased costs and services to maintain, enhance, or add new services, grow fund balance reserves, and maintain and add new infrastructure. Then the COVID-19 pandemic has become a new focus, causing the economy to change in an instant. Governments and businesses across our nation are in similar situations. Projecting its impact is difficult since this is very different from recessions of the past. The depth is very sudden, but the duration is unknown. Therefore, taking a phased approach, budgeting approach, is being recommended today. The proposed budget recognizes that this is not business as usual. Almost 1 month ago, the impacts were estimated and the proposed budget of revenue and expenditures reduced. Also, spending holds were implemented, as Marcia discussed, immediately to minimize impacts. It is important to note that the estimated reductions incorporated in the proposed budget are for a point in time, the last quarter of 1920 and through September 2020. These reductions did not impact current service levels. If the revenue shortfalls are greater than estimated and the duration longer, additional reductions will be needed. This approach recognizes that those conversations take longer and require thoughtful analysis. Our financial policies are written in such a way to allow for a measured expenditure reduction approach. We will monitor revenues monthly and review with mayor and council quarterly as stated by the city manager. This approach allows for flexibility. If revenues rebound, it allows for services to continue, but also positions us to strategically reduce services if need be. So data is important to make financial decisions, but changes quickly during economic uncertainty. Last night, our Economic Development Director, Mike Miranda, presented on the economic impact of COVID-19 with current data on consumption and impacts on retail, restaurants, hotels, unemployment, and manufacturing. He discussed Chandler's economy is well diversified with a larger share of employment in industries that have been less impacted, such as high-tech manufacturing and finance, and insurance. Finally, he emphasized Chandler's strong fundamentals that position us well during these uncertain times. So this is interesting. This slide represents some information that was published by Bloomberg as of April 16th, 2020. The gross domestic product, gross domestic product, or GDP, much easier to say, forecast. So GDP represents consumption, investments, government spending, and exports, less imports, and is a factor used to monitor the economy. This chart shows the average estimated GDP projections in the orange bubble. It represents projections of GDP to either be at 0 or higher by Q3 of 2020. This seems optimistic, but will likely change as we move through the weeks. Therefore, making a measured approach to reductions based on actual data is vital. How we monitor and report out. How will we monitor and report out? We will continue to prepare our monthly and quarterly revenue and expenditure reports, but we'll add a new monthly COVID-19 impact report. This report will track Chandler's top 51 transaction privilege taxpayers in various sectors, and the top 51 actually represent 45% of our total sales tax collections. Additionally, we will report out on various vulnerable revenues that were reduced in the proposed budget and compare to actuals to ensure transparency. So you can see how what's actually happening is comparing to our projections down to that level. This will allow us to refine the 6 and 9 month projections developed early on should the duration of COVID-19 impacts continue. So I'm going to apologize now because there's a few of these bar charts, or these tubular charts, I like to call them, but they're here for a reason, so bear with me. But I know there's a lot of numbers on it. But what this one's meant to represent, now that we've reviewed the phased budgeting approach of COVID-19, is the 2021 proposed budget as presented. This presentation actually, the total proposed budget is $901 million, which is about $27 million less than our current 1920 adopted budget, or 2.8% less, and represents all funds revenues that fund various city services and operations. So the presentation is showing our proposed budget on the bottom compared to our current year adopted 1920 budget. And just to kind of point out a couple things, because again, this is all funds, not just general fund, but all of our enterprise funds, our special revenue funds, our housing grant funds, all of those type of things. So the maroon section represents the use of fund balances. And as I mentioned, our fund balances are very healthy after years of economic prosperity. So the $66 million increase over last year reflects the use of general fund, impact fees, bond funds, and so on. It's received in previous years, and then we actually utilize it in 2021 as projects continue on. Fiscal year 1920 included the sale of general obligation bonds, and that's that kind of mint green at the very end of the top bar. We sold bonds, and of course then those proceeds become fund balance in the next year, and those are being continue to be used. The orange, blue, and yellow, the next 3 slices represent grants, our local sales tax, and state shared revenues. The total amount for these has increased about $6 million, mainly due to increases in grants from several street projects, while total taxes have decreased. We are still estimating an increase to state share due primarily to urban revenue sharing, which is our income tax, because that is actually running 2 years behind. So we won't feel the impacts of that for 2 more years. So we're still seeing that go up because it's from the last couple of years that represents. So it's kind of interesting how this happens. But in the state shared revenues, because this is all funds, this is not just our income tax, state shared sales tax, and vehicle license, but it also includes HERF, which is a special revenue fund. So when you see the general fund, it's going to, that orange or yellow section will be smaller because HERF won't be included. And HERF monies are still coming in, or highway user revenue fees. But I should mention on that, the state actually estimated a little over 18 million coming in on HERF. We've got that budgeted at about 16.5. So we're looking at reductions even in some of those special revenue funds, although we've been focused on general fund. I'll mention some of those as we go along as well. The green and pink, these are small slices and represent property tax, system development fees, which of course are dedicated to capital projects, growth projects, and reflect an increase of about 2 million overall, mainly due to increases in the property values and adding new properties to our tax rolls, which we've also done. The gray represents other services and receipts, and that's about a $1 million reduction. That's an area that you'll see those facility costs that are being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to social distance. Purple represents utility charges for enterprise systems, and there's a decrease reflected here of about 8 million. And again, we tried to make sure we looked at water, wastewater, realistically realizing that many are not going to be able to pay their bills. And we have implemented customer-friendly solutions, recognizing that there is pain out in our community, and we are not doing shutoffs, or disconnects. We are working with customers. We're extending payment plans well beyond what we typically do, but we're going to continue to do that for quite some time. But that reduction in revenues is also reflected here. And then I already mentioned the green, which is the bond sales, and we are not planning any bond sales in the current year 2021. So here's another one. So the view, I apologize ahead of time, the view repeats for the 2021 proposed revenues representing all funds at 901 million. That's the top bar. So that's just repeated what we just went over. But right below it is the portion of those revenues that are general fund only. General fund totals 367.1 million and makes up 40.7% of our total revenues. This already reflects the 20 million or 8% reduction due to COVID-19 from the originally projected amount. It takes into account Chandler-specific revenue impacts and represents a point in time or for a 3-month period. As we move through the phases of economic reestablishment and obtain actual data, the projections will continue to be updated. Although we're very different from the state, I thought it would be helpful to talk a moment about the state of Arizona, what the state of Arizona is doing. The state of Arizona has a $11.8 billion budget and is estimating a $1.1 billion shortfall due to COVID-19 based on Arizona Republic article on April 9th. That represents 9% of their budget. Everyone is making their best guess at this point with the unknown and not knowing for sure the duration of this. Our fiscal year 2021 first quarter 8% reduction could very well be understated. The city has healthy reserves and financial policies that allow for a strategic, thoughtful approach to reductions to ensure ongoing expenditures do not exceed ongoing revenues. Now let's talk about the largest and most vulnerable revenue component, which is our TPT or sales tax. And again, another tubular chart. Okay. Transaction privilege taxes, again reflected in millions, but this is the comparison of our projection pre-COVID and post-COVID. Local sales tax makes up 51% of our annual revenue in our general fund. There are 11 categories or taxable activities that make up the projected $121.7 million for 2021. This presentation reflects the COVID-19 reductions reflected in the black segment at the very end there. That's what we actually pulled out of each of those years, 1920 and 2021. 7.1 million and 14.9 million. for that period of time. Asterisks note categories most impacted and represent 3 months of impact in each fiscal year. As you can see, not all categories are anticipated to be impacted. Is there any questions so far? Keep going? Okay. So I will tell you there's 2 more of these tubular presentations of the annual expenditure budget. So what this is now is the expenditure side. We've been focused on revenues through all of those presentation or all those prior slides, but now we're going to look at how those revenues are appropriated in the proposed budget. And again, this chart reflects all funds, so not just general fund, but enterprise funds and highway user funds, special revenue grant funds, everything. It breaks, and I won't get into all the details here, I'll just point out a couple things. The maroon section represents the department operating budgets for all funds. So this is utility operations, police, fire, administration, community services, and so on. Overall, this funding has decreased about $16 million from the current year. This is a 3.9% decrease, which is mainly due to the impacts of COVID spending reductions and a reduction in the PSPRS additional payment, which the reduction compared to the prior year was $10.7 million less. And then just to real quickly, the major capital is in gray, which is the new appropriation, and then we have the carry forward projects that are in blue, and we'll talk more about capital later on the expenditure side, so I won't get into the details on that. Debt service really isn't changing much, even though we had a bond sale. We had bonds that were paid off this year, which was great, so we added debt, but we paid off debt, so it kind of left us nice and flat, which is a great position. And then also in the green are contingencies and reserves, and that includes that 15% general fund contingency, as well as other reserves that we have budgeted and this is decreased $16 million, mainly due to a combination of decreases in encumbrance reserve, because just like capital carry forward, anything that's already encumbered with a contract, that appropriation has to come over from the current year to be able to spend it in the following year. So that becomes part of the budget.
Don, bear with me, the circling back just a couple slides.
Okay?
And I know you covered this, but I'm a numbers guy, and so I would like to place some confidence on these revenue numbers. So fund balance on a 1 to 10 scale, 10, that's you're expecting that, right? That's 100%. The fund balance.
Yes,
of
it
the
already exists.
Yes.
Yes.
So in that vernacular, 10 being total confidence, 1 being, I don't know, grants, 49 million. How do you feel on that?
It's probably in the middle, because there are some that we are confident we're going to get. We get year over year, but this is kind of an uncertain time right now. There's also, because it's an uncertain time, we're getting some new grant funding as well. So we've built in some appropriation that allows us to accept and spend new grants should they arise. So it's kind of a 50-50.
Now, when you say 50-50, how much of a swing in millions?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to get the
It's
detail
okay,
on the grants
no stress,
themselves.
but bear with me, because I'm going to ask
Okay,
the same question.
Gotcha.
So as we go across to the next one, the local taxes, that's the one that's the most vulnerable,
Absolutely.
okay? And then you got state shared revenue. I know you said there's a delay. How confident do you feel on that?
That is absolutely the fact. On the
Okay.
delay on
So that's a
income
10.
tax,
That's a 10.
that's a 10 on that portion. But remember, also part of that state shared is state shared sales tax, which is vulnerable. And we have vehicle licensing tax that we get a share of that based on our population, and less cars on the road, less vehicle purchases, that one will also be impacted
For the state shared.
for state share.
So it could be less than 88 million, you don't
It
feel
could
on
absolutely be less than that.
a percentage basis?
Oh, goodness. Well, and that's part of what we have to monitor. That's
Okay,
part of the unknown about how long this will go. We've already built in a reduction in that area, but it could be deeper.
So, I mean, I guess I ask, because the year before it was 86, now it's 88. And so we're heading into rougher climate. How are we even projecting an increase?
What are the one that does both here? Again, because a very large portion of that, almost 50%, is the income tax portion. And that's the part that's still going up. For the next 2 years, it'll go up before we feel what's happening today,
Okay,
which
that's
is
the
really
delay-
unique.
That's the delayed.
That's the
before-
delay one,
Okay,
correct.
all right.
That's a great question.
Fair enough. 4 more and we're done. So the same question on the property tax for,
On property tax, so this is the section that has both primary and secondary.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I will tell you, we are anticipating some cash flow. It's more of a cash flow issue when it comes to property tax, and that's what happened back in the Great Recession as well. I know mortgage companies are working with citizens. Many of the property tax bills are paid through escrow accounts. So it just depends on that situation, but we may feel something. The reason for the increase here, though, is because we've added new property to our tax rolls. About 4.5% of our assessed value increase is a result of new property. So we're seeing that increase.
system development fees?
That development is still pretty strong. So although we had projected a slight reduction, it's still going. We're projecting that in the new year it will continue.
Okay. And then the last two, other services, service charges and receipts, the
Okay.
68 million.
This is a section that's made up of kind of the hodgepodge of everything: sale of fixed assets, interest income on our idle funds, revenues off our facilities, community, our cultural, our school shared IGA revenue agreements that we have. It's just a culmination of anything that doesn't fit in the other categories. So I guess in that case, maybe 25% of that, because a lot of that we don't bank on year over year for ongoing. Those are really, a lot of those, the facility ones we bank on for ongoing, but a good portion of those are fluctuate from year to year, so they're in our one-time category.
And then the last one, utilities, is that a high confidence?
Utility charges are pretty consistent, but with what's happening right now, we are trying to build in a slight reduction for non-payment and just extending that out in future projections. And we may have more write-offs as well, so we're looking at that. And, thank you, Marcia. The utility funds, because of years of managing those funds very conservatively, we actually have very strong reserves, and I have a slide a little bit later that shows where we're positioned in those funds. So even if the revenues don't come in, we have reserves that will sustain us.
Thank you, Don and Marcia. Mayor and
Absolutely.
council, appreciate it. I just wanted to get a gauge on confidence and revenue. Thank you, guys.
You bet. Okay. All right. Where are we? All right, so we just talked about all funds, where the appropriation's being spent. I'm going to have Matt turn our slide to the next one, this is just general fund. So if you've not had enough of these tubular presentations, this chart shows general fund only appropriation. The proposed general fund budget has decreased from 400 million to 367 million, or 8% reduction. The main reason for this decrease is reduction of the one-time PSPRS payment, reduced capital carry forward, and COVID-19 spending reductions. Okay.
So, Mayor, do you have a breakout of that? Of the difference between the 400 and 367?
No, but we can certainly prepare one.
Well, I mean, 40, I'm assuming 40 million of that is what you're, you got a $33 million delta there, right, roughly?
Yep.
How much is that is actually the 20, is it 20 million of that is what you're looking for the COVID ID for the next quarter, or is it, I'm trying to figure out where that reduction is.
Okay, so let me go through a couple of these sections and I can point out where the reductions are.
Okay.
Department operating in the general fund, the net decrease is 15 million. And this is the area that we have the PSPRS unfunded liability, the increased employer contributions, and the additional payment budgeted. But it is lower than the prior year. So that's part of that reduction of about 10.7 million of that 15. Would be 4.2 higher if not. So I'm trying to read my notes here. This section would be 4.2 million higher if we didn't take the measures that we implemented for the COVID-19 reductions. So the biggest, though, is that change in the PSPRS. Otherwise, our department operating, that's where we try to manage it very, I guess, consistently.
So the 15 million out of department operating fund, you're going to go over that as well?
That's what I was just talking about.
I'm sorry,
The
yeah.
15 million is the reduction from 1920 to 2021. Out of that total, 10.7 million is the change of what we had budgeted in the current year for the PSPRS overpayment to what we have budgeted this year.
Okay, now I got you.
Okay, and then the rest of it would be the reductions that we actually implemented as a result of COVID. Because every year in 1920 we had built in an increase because of new operating needs and everything else. This year we pulled out a lot of those new requests and tried to keep the budget as even as possible.
Got it.
Did
So
you
it's
have a
more of
question?
cost avoidance than,
Yes,
Okay,
more
that's-
cost avoidance in that area.
that's what I was, okay, that's what I'm driving at. All right, thanks.
Okay. All right, so talk a little bit about our property tax and what that means to the median value homeowner in Chandler. Chandler's primary property tax levy goes into our general fund and supports our day-to-day operations of the city, such as public safety, parks, community services, and so on. A secondary property tax levy is used to pay debt service on bonds that were issued in past years. Each year, the city must evaluate the revenue requirements from these sources, as well as the impact of the property taxes on homeowners and businesses. Both taxes are based on limited property values established by Maricopa County Assessor. For the upcoming year, the assessor has set the limited value of the median value home in Chandler at $203,354. $538. Sorry, I think I had the wrong number in there. Sorry about that. This is an increase of 5% in the current year. To help offset this increase, a proposed reduction in the primary tax rate from 0.2581 cents per 100 of assessed value to 0.2501 cents is incorporated, as Marcia discussed earlier. This will reduce the total rate from 1.1281 to 1.1201. So what does that mean for the median value homeowner? That means it minimizes the increase. It would have been 12.48, but it is now brings it down to $10.86 additional in their annual property tax bill. That's an increase of 90 cents per month. And again, because of that reduction, we did reduce the primary side, but on the secondary side, that's where it allows us to continue to pay debt service on our capital projects. And that's where the annual increase is coming from, is on the secondary side. As we talked about previously, the property tax revenue is unique from transaction privilege tax because it's locked in for the year based on assessed values and generally paid through citizen escrow accounts. Mortgage companies are working with residents to manage payments and extended plans, and we're anticipating a reduction from non-payments, although this would be considered a timing or cash flow issue, since property tax revenues will eventually be paid as experienced during the Great Recession. Questions? Okay, we're almost through, and I'll turn it over to Matt here. So an important part of the budget process is the preparation of the General Fund 5-year ongoing forecast to assist the city with sound financial decisions, which forms the basis of the 2021 proposed budget. Pages 8 and 9 of the executive summary in your budget highlights book, or in your proposed budget book, has the information regarding the next couple slides. The 5-year general fund ongoing forecast is projecting revenues almost even with the prior year, $241 million versus $251 million, or 3.9% over revised. After reviewing all individual revenue projections and incorporating initial COVID-19 reductions through September, we have determined 89%, or $214 million, to be ongoing in nature, and 11% or $27 million to be one-time. The long-term operating forecast manages costs with slow revenue growth due to the potential economic slowdown, starting with COVID-19 impacts. We're now spending the FY 19-20 or how are we spending the 214 ongoing? The largest expense is personnel because we are a service organization. And as this slide shows, personnel includes estimate for employee wages and benefit adjustments. The association agreement commitments are included in the proposed budget, as well as an estimate on general employees. And it does, as Marcia mentioned, add 2 net new general fund ongoing positions. In the operations and maintenance side, ongoing essential department requests are included, and those will be discussed as we talk through them with our department directors. And the CIP, we do a very good job in making sure that if a capital project is coming forward and it has additional O&M, that's included in our ongoing forecast, that we know we can pay for that as that rolls forward. So that has been included in the full 5-year forecast. All right, so what is the net impact on revenues and expenditures after applying all of our assumptions and distinguishing ongoing revenues from one-time? We are in a situation of about 0 to 2.5% ongoing growth for revenues, and this is over the 5-year period, and 0 to 1.2% for expenditures. This projection reflects a structurally balanced budget with ongoing expenditures not exceeding ongoing revenues in the out years. It is conservative, projecting little to no ongoing growth with the COVID economic impacts. We must also be cautious as legislative actions threaten local revenues annually, so managing future expenditure growth is vital. The 2021 proposed budget continues the budget stabilization reserve in the amount of $10 million. This reserve provides the opportunity to balance the budget in the future for no more than 3 consecutive years. This is the language in our financial policies, until permanent ongoing reductions can be implemented. And this is should state legislation, unexpected decreases in property values, or other economic issues like our COVID-19 cause operating revenues to continue to decrease. Additionally, the proposed budget does retain the appropriated general fund contingency of 15%, which is now valued at $34.8 million. Now let's talk about the fund balance that's accumulated over time in the general fund due to revenues exceeding projections annually. Looking to the future, our one-time general fund balance is currently projected to end the year at $165 million. That's the gray bar on this slide. This is a projection based on current spending assumptions. The decline, which of course incorporates the holds that Marcia has already implemented with the departments. The decline from 1920 of 165 to 2021 of 101 million assumes full spending of all appropriated projects. This is really kind of something I want to hone in a little bit on here, because when we looked at removing 20 million from the budget, it was a combination of ongoing and one-time, and it did not have service impacts. This is really the accumulated general fund. You can see that difference between the 165 and the 101. That's what's appropriated in this budget. If our revenues do not come in as planned, these are the projects and the one-time costs that we can stop, not do. So this includes that additional PSPRS payment. This includes that 14.8 million in general funded capital. It includes capital carry forward for general fund. All that appropriation that is in the proposed budget is exactly a part that we can look at pulling out. The question is on the duration. Is it going to be a V recession? Is it going to be a W? Is it going to be an L? If it's an L, is it going to be a J? I don't know. But if it's an L, that's where you're looking at ongoing reductions over time. And that's what we don't know right now. So we can make reductions. We can make one-time reductions. But the bigger question is, do we need to make ongoing reductions? Because we can pull out one time all day long, But we're looking at an approach where we can leave that in there, hold it. Should revenue come back, we would be able to continue with our projects and that type of thing. But this would really be that area. So I think I made my point on that, but if anyone has a question there, this would be the general fund balance that draws from reserves should our revenues not come in. A question that often comes up, whoops.
Thank you, Mayor. So a lot of numbers going here.
Yeah.
One of the things that caught me was we were talking about the contingency fund at 34.8 million, plus a stabilization fund of 10 million, which accounts for 44.8 million. Are we not dipping into that through this budget so that will remain whole?
Through the Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, that is a perfect question for this, because when we're looking at these projections, we are looking at it as if we are not spending that $34.8 million 15% contingency reserve. We're assuming we're not going to tap into that. It's appropriated, but that's not what's causing this reduction. These are actual appropriations that are for capital projects, PSPRS overpayment, money that's going to go out the door. That contingency, if it's not spent, falls back into general fund and just simply gets reappropriated annually should we need to make some spending or do additional spending during the year. For example, a grant comes in, we don't have enough grant appropriation, we can ask council to use some of that contingency appropriation, move it to the grant fund, and allow us to spend that grant. We typically don't spend much of that on an annual basis, so it simply falls back into general fund, gets reappropriated the following year.
Follow-up question, Mayor. Thank you. That's great explanation. So we have this stabilization fund. We have great credit. I'm seeing some things that are stimulating the economy when the small business market and things like that. Is there a way that we can leverage that fund? It's taxpayer dollars. It's our community's money. We're holding it at a time when it actually needs to be in the market. Is there a way that we can do loans against that, or is there a way we can give that money back? Is there a way we can? I'm just broaching that subject. We can talk about it later today or tomorrow or on Monday, but I'd like to know more about that.
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, we can certainly look into that. I know the gifting clause and other things that do come into play when we start looking at those type of things. But we can look at that if council wants us to look at possibly issuing loans against our general fund contingencies.
Yeah, and just to follow up with Councilmember Stewart's question, I think we referred to it earlier. During the recession, capital projects saved us. Shovel-ready projects saved us. There's a lot of projects, or there's some projects in here that only a small business would bid on that we may be taking out, that maybe we want to consider at a later date to put those back in, as you're indicating, to help prime the small business, construction companies, that type of activity. So that's a thought I'm capturing as well. I'm seeing what you're trying to say is how do we jumpstart the small business? Some of that may be, again, hypothetically, putting some of those smaller projects, which a Kitchell wouldn't, bid on, but that we know a small business would bid on, be able to jumpstart those companies too as well. So that's a good thought to capture, and that's another way of maybe doing what you want to do is get that jumpstart. This 101, Dawn, I want to focus, Dawn,
Yes.
sorry. I want to focus on the 101. If everything goes well, which, again, we're trying to be optimistic here in some cases, or at least try to be optimistic. Out of the 101 million, what you're saying, just said now with Councilmember Stewart's question is, if we would, the 15% would roll over to 2021, the management, maybe the budget stabilization, I got that right, didn't I? With $10 million, plus anything additional above that is also, is that appropriated or not appropriated? That's my question.
Okay, let me, through the Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, let me see if I can answer this. So the 101, in order to, So picture this like your savings account. Right now, we're estimating at the end of 1920, we're going to have $165 million in the general fund savings account. We have the capital projects budgeted, the PSPRS overpayment, many operating one-time decision packages you'll hear about today, and so on. If every dollar of those got spent, it would come down to 101 million, which doesn't typically happen. If revenues aren't coming in, we would not spend much of that, and we would try to continue to leverage or use that higher fund balance to go towards the revenue shortfalls to fund our operating. So we'd have to hold off on some of those one-time capital and so on. But that's the balance here is it's kind of like planning a home improvement, and then something like this happens and you hold off on it.
And I get that, and I appreciate that, but I guess my question, and I apologize if it wasn't, if we did spend the 165, I mean, the delta, that $54 million, let's say we did that, even at the end of the year, at an optimistic level, you'd still have $101 million in the bank account, using your term, correct?
Yes.
Of which, by ordinance, 77 million of that must be a minimum maintaining, correct?
Per our financial reserve policy, yes, 4 months value of operating reserve is what we should not fall below.
Right.
And that would be 77.4 million.
Right.
So we try to manage that over a 5-year period, that we don't go below that in any of our projections.
Got it. So I guess my point was, even though we're being very conservative on this budget, we're reducing some areas, we still are probably better than a lot of cities or communities around this nation by having some kind of a reserve left for the residents or for this
We
community.
are very fortunate,
Okay,
Councilmember.
that's
You
what I
are
was
correct.
driving at. Great, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
So, again, this was not an affecting question, so just a request to look into something. So I think councils have the, as authority or that fits within what we're doing today. So we don't need to really have a debate about Councilmember Stewart's request for us to look into that, since we're not changing this budget at all, but we are looking into options within that. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Just one other comment too, related to Councilmember Orlando's. I have heard from other cities, LA, for example, with their, I think part of their department, they're doing a 26-day mandatory no pay, stay home. Other cities that have such a higher, in Ohio, there's cities that are having like a 14 employee per 1,000, where we're at 6 point something. They're doing massive furloughs through this. So we are very fortunate in terms of the conservative planning that we've had, and that when I hear these horror stories out of some of these other cities, we're just not there because of the proven track record of being a lean city as well as having adequate reserves. So it's been a good policy that has proven the test of time, where other cities have, when times are good, they look good, but when times are bad, they've got to take some drastic cuts that, at least at this point, we're not contemplating in this budget.
Yeah, Mayor, follow up. I agree 100%. What I'm trying to say is I agree with Councilmember Stewart in trying to look at other ways of jumpstarting small businesses. So I applaud that thought process.
We heard that. Thank you. All right. Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Just short anecdotal story. My mother, who's 88 years old, a number of family members over the years have tried to get loans or finance from her on different things. And luckily, she has not done that, and she's taken care of herself, living on Social Security. And I say to her, her greatest gift to the family is taking care of herself, taking care of her business, and making sure that she is not a liability to the family. If you can apply that to the city, if we take care of business here and we manage what's important and pay our bills and have money left over, to me, that is the primary thing that we should be doing. Thank you.
There's a bullet there somewhere. It's good for Grandma, it's good for Chandler. I guess, is what counts.
We already have our tagline. So I want to clarify a little something. So my question is a deeper question of, we've got money, we've got a little bit of a reduction that we're going to be able to absorb this impact. I think that's absolutely 100% fiscally sustainable. It's responsible. It's the right thing to do. If I'm looking at it and I do the over the fence conversation with my neighbor and I say, we did all this and we still have $44 million. My neighbor's going to ask me, are we taxing our community too much? And I'll just leave you with that.
Keep going, Don. That was rhetorical.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mayor. All right, so the general fund balance projection. So I did want to mention here too, when we're looking at, right now we've incorporated an 8% reduction, and much of it came out of our one-time budgeted items, about 4.7 out of ongoing. But if you were to increase that, say to a 20% reduction, what that would mean is another $32 million on top of that. Then you're starting to get into much bigger conversations about what capital projects to cut and so on, or potentially services if you're looking at the one-time side. So that is why I think that measured approach and monitoring as we get actual data, we can make really good, solid decisions as we move through the year, but still provide that flexibility with what's in the budget. Just make that final point. Okay. All right. So this is something we haven't included in prior budget briefings. We tend to focus a lot overall and then on general fund. But I did want to show you, because this year we are having impacts in our water wastewater area, and we've got increases in our capital that are pretty significant as we try to focus on maintaining that aging infrastructure. But we are positioned very well in our enterprise funds. These are the funds that are self-supporting. They're funded by user fees. So if you use water, you're going to pay for that water. Those user fees stay within each of these individual funds and fund their operations, their capital, their debt service costs, and their reserves. But we do not use those dollars in our general fund, okay? Those funds pay for the services that they receive and are supported by their user fees. So within each of those funds, we are showing here the fund balance projection. We have very healthy fund balances in these funds. We are also showing on this slide for each of the enterprise funds projections in rates over the next 5 years. So we want to be very transparent about what we're seeing in the future. Again, these are just projections, but the current year we are not anticipating increasing any of our enterprise fund rates. But looking into 2021, we are anticipating an increase. But I will mention we are planning a cost of service study, and that breaks down the user fee into every customer class and helps us understand every customer class and their demand on our systems. Is it fair, the portion of that user fee that they're getting charged? So a resident versus a multifamily versus a industry, that type of thing. That's going to happen this year, and it can certainly impact future rate projections, so I just want to put that out there. But one thing I think we're really proud of is the fact that we are maintaining these funds very well. Our partners in utilities do an amazing job with the infrastructure and all the facilities they have to maintain, and have done incredibly long projections on what needs to be done in order to maintain the facilities and infrastructure. I think they're working on an outlook of 50 years now, which is incredible. We have incorporated some reduction due to COVID-19 in 2 of these funds. And of course, we've had a lot of conversation on solid waste and the issues that are happening there. So one of the things the city manager is proposing in this budget is an increase to the operating reserve in the solid waste fund. It's currently in our financial policies at 10%, and we're looking at bringing that up to 15%. And that's a little higher in comparison to the other funds as well, but it's just with the higher volatility and what's happening with nationwide recycling, it seemed a prudent move to do, and those adjustments to the financial policies, we're anticipating bringing those forward in May. This change to the reserve policy, as well as the changes to the pension funding policy based on our discussions this year. Any questions on that?
So on that solid waste, you're saying it was at 10 before?
It was
And
only at
So you're
10.
proposing it to 15? Okay.
And that is the minimum reserve. We're at, right now, we're above that. But one thing that's interesting in the solid waste fund is we do also maintain a separate reserve in there that's required for our landfill. Post-closure compliance requires us to maintain a reserve that's about 4.2 million. So part of that, the balance that shows there is dedicated separate, and then we have to do a 10%, or now 15%, if that passes. We would hold that for the operations of the solid waste fund.
Would that be the reason why you wouldn't go to 20 where, like everywhere else?
Um,
Do you have that other reserve? Why not making it 20? like
Make
the
it
other?
20 as well?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, moving it to 15, I think is prudent because in the solid waste fund, most of our costs are contractual. So we can project those really well. And so taking a look at that, that's why the recommendation to go to 15%. If it was more volatile, like water or wastewater, when it really was, something that we were unsure as in terms of cost or heavy capital expenditures, then I would certainly agree with your recommendation. But I think 15% really sets us well when we know we don't have a lot of cost except for contractual obligations in that fund.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then you've seen this slide quite a bit. Every year, we receive information from the city of Tempe regarding cost of service study. It is a little bit behind because it represents July 2019, but again, I think it's a great message, especially in this point in time that we're going through in our community and around the entire globe. The fact that, we do continue to maintain very low cost of service. And as Marcia showed, the separate, if you just peel out water, wastewater, solid waste, we are now the lowest in that area. But in this presentation, it also includes property tax and sales tax for an average family of 4. The average across the valley is $2,038, the annual residential cost. In Chandler, it's $1,664. So I just, it's such a great message to put out to our citizens as well.
Let me ask a question first. Do you anticipate other changes, or you're getting earlier stories from any of these other cities of any, there's always kind of a rise in everything, but any changes in positions on any of these that you see?
Mayor, we are anticipating changes. For instance, Gilbert has already instituted an increase that went into effect after July 2019, so we know they're going to probably go above in the next update, July 2020.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Also, always in this slide, I always do like to make sure that we point out to our citizens that even though we are very in comparison with Gilbert, which are very good neighbors to the northeast, we have an airport that we also operate and maintain that they do not. So, like adding that in.
And libraries and pools.
Public housing.
Okay, a lot more.
But we're not competitive.
But we're not competitive. Yeah.
All right, let's don't beat up on our good neighbors to the east.
Okay, so Matt Dunbar, our budget manager, is going to also talk about our capital improvement plan before we turn it back to the mayor to start department presentations. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Mayor and council, next I'll provide some information about the fiscal year 2020 to 21 proposed CIP and the 10-year capital plan. So the fiscal year 2020-21 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is developed with a team of key folks from each department throughout the city. This team works collaboratively to plan for projects that meet the mayor and council goals and objectives and the citizens' needs, while planning for the best use of resources each year. The CIP uses a variety of one-time funding sources from general fund, bond funds, HERF, SDF, enterprise funds, grants, and impact fee funds. The team focuses on ensuring the projects are funded in a way as to not cause a property tax increase, maximize use of all funding types, and a CIP that meets the defined focus and guidance of mayor and council, for example, focusing on maintenance and addressing public needs. This slide indicates a history, or a 10-year history, with comparison of the last 4 CIPs with the proposed 21 to 2030 CIP shown at far at the right at $1.16 billion, which is a $227 million or 24% increase from the current 10-year plan. 70% of that increase, or $160 million, is mainly due to a higher emphasis on maintaining aging infrastructure, including significant water and wastewater facility and infrastructure improvements of about $150 million. Of that $160 million is utility specific. So some of the highlights from the 10-year CIP is mentioned on the previous slide, but worth mentioning again, the CIP places a higher focus on maintaining existing infrastructure by adding 25% of additional appropriation over the prior year, with the majority of this increase due to major water and wastewater facility and infrastructure maintenance. The CIP also adds technology and communication updates and enhancements, and requested new projects such as Gilbert and Alma School Roads, regional park development funding, Veterans Memorial Park Phase 2, airport improvements, and the first phase of Lantana Ranch Park, which will all add additional amenities to the citizens of Chandler. One of the keys to our planned CIP is anticipated future property value, and that growth that will continue to keep our secondary property levy at a level where we can support additional bond sales. We're currently projecting modest growth at 4% per year, reflected by the gray bars, until fiscal year 2024-25, and then showing an increase of 2.5%. If growth starts falling short of this target, we will reassess in our planned projects and the funding streams for those projects. As far as some of the bond needs, the slow but steady increase in assessed values somewhat limits our potential for general obligation bond sales. However, we have shown here the anticipated bond sales to support our current CIP over the next 5 years at our current tax rate. The projections could change if assessed values increase do not meet our projections, and changes due to COVID-19 are seen in those projections. The secondary tax levy at the current rate maintains the city's bonding capacity, but the ability to pay back the debt service fund with SDFs for loans made on growth projects completed prior to revenue collection is helping add capacity and support additional maintenance and projects in our CIP. This slide indicates the remaining bond authorization by type of voter-approved debt. We also indicate the date the bond authorization is anticipated to be exhausted based on the current CIP. For example, should we wish to fund a project for fire, they are currently out of bond authorization, and with the current CIP bond-funded projects, police would run out of authorization in 2025. Therefore, a citizen committee is planned to be formed to vet community project needs and make recommendations for potential 2021 bond election.
Mayor, if I may, I want to add something to that as well. There was a question that came up earlier around this, and the 10-year plan, I believe it was Councilmember Stewart, the 10-year plan currently as it sits, we don't have enough bond authorization in there. It does not require a tax increase, but we don't, to complete our 10-year plan, we're not anticipating any tax increase, but we would need a bond election to continue projects all the way through the full 10 years. And it notes here the date that that authorization is exhausted in order to continue with those projects. Does that make sense? Okay.
So on that, you created another question for me, but so we're saying that in the future when we do plan on going to bond, that we're going to need to rebond or do new bonds, but we're expecting to have paid off previous bonds. That's why the tax increase would not be needed.
No,
How do you
so,
take on more bonds without having to raise taxes? That's my kind of question.
yeah, so through the mayor, Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Lopez, sorry about that. Long night last night. When we're planning our 10-year plan, we're anticipating growth in our assessed value base because of new property. So we're able to add a little bit each year and maintain bond-funded projects and add bond funding projects as we go through the 10-year plan. The problem is we don't have the authority to sell those bonds, and that's where the bond election will be required before the end of the 10 years. So what we already have programmed, we wouldn't be able to do, like in Park and Rec, by 2027, we're out of bond authorization. we can still do the projects without a tax increase if our assessed value assumptions are correct. But we wouldn't be able to sell it because we don't have voter authorization.
I understand that we don't have the fund balance available or authorization available, but I was asking about that, and that makes sense on, as rates go up, or our values go up, then our revenues can go up. So, and also for like example, like museum, library, I don't know if I asked this before, but since it doesn't have an expiration date, authorization exhausted, that's when it's exhausted, planned to be out of, and so those dates that don't have any in there, that means that we're good to go, they don't expire, or do they expire? Like the museum one that was there, I mean, I know we're done with the museum, but maybe pick another one that.
Yep, through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez, that's an excellent question. Bond authorization does not expire. So as you can continue to use it, it just so happens the museum, we have no other bond-funded projects in the plan, but we have remaining authorization. So one of the things we're talking to our financial advisor about in bond council is, can we move that like up into Park and Rec if there's some sort of commonality? We've done it before with some remaining Center for the Art. It had like 500 million or 500,000, sorry, in remaining authorization. It was just sitting there. And we actually were able to do that through our bond council. They created the paperwork and we brought it forward to council to approve that shift. We're hoping we can do that with some of this to try to maximize the areas that we're using.
Right, okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
So Dawn, is it fair to say that since 2007, and at a certain point, we've been using the bonds, which is the reason why we have a AAA bond rating is because we get good rates on it. Otherwise, what good is have a AAA bond rating? But we've also used a lot of cash, which saved the taxpayers a lot of dollars in the past, as well as even this year. So it's important that we keep the whole story here, that, you know, we've been using a lot of cash to a lot of projects, streets, amenities, and now we're at the point where the cash may not cover the growth projection to keep our community as quality of life we've expected. So is that a fair statement?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I think with the measured approach we're taking, I think we can continue to have a very quality plan and quality of life for our citizens. But I guess I'm not sure how else to answer that. I
So
apologize.
what I'm trying, it's more of a statement, I guess, and I apologize. I don't mean to put you on the spot. My point is this: we've successfully, over the 20-something years, 25 years, used both bond money to expand our city, whether it's streets, water, fire, et cetera. And we've also used cash. And we keep forgetting that we used a lot of cash over the years. I mean, the city hall was cash. And that saved taxpayers probably millions of dollars over the time frame because we were able to use the cash. But what I'm hearing right now is that we're getting to the point where the cash is going down, which is the right thing to do, to spend that cash, that bank account. But now we have to say, okay, as a council, what do we do next now to continue the growth, continue the street expansion, the fire, the police? We have to probably sell bonds.
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, you are correct. And if we were to go back and probably put the interest that we would have paid on those projects, that would be definitely a savings. But I think the thing that the community and needs to keep in mind is some of these projects are millions. And then if you want that project built today, you're going to have to basically, like your home, take out the loan, build it, and then pay it off. Or you have to save for 20 years before you're able to fund a project of that magnitude. So that is when the bond funds are definitely helpful to go ahead and be able to do those projects upfront, and especially with the interest rates being practically nothing because of our AAA bond ratings, that is where those things really come into play.
Right. So thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Continue.
All right. So on this next slide, we're going to talk specifically about the upcoming year. The proposed CIP budget for fiscal 2020-21 is $345.8 million and is made up of three components. There's new project funding at $150.9 million, capital carry forward funding of or $194.4 million, and a small lump sum reserve of $450,000. Very few capital projects actually start and end on the same fiscal year. So to keep this appropriation, state law requires that any unspent appropriation be appropriated by council for the following fiscal year to continue those projects. This year's capital carry forward total is made up of 40% utility projects and 39% streets and traffic projects, and the rest is miscellaneous other projects throughout the city. The fiscal year 2020-21 proposed CIP is 2.9% or $9.9 million more, mainly due to new projects compared to the prior year. This next slide is kind of our shift into the department operating and CIP presentations. Directors and managers will discuss their top 3 fiscal year 2019 and 2020 accomplishments and 2 notable COVID-19 impacts or actions they've taken. They will show on their slide the size of their operating budget, their employee count, and how the department is funded, and discuss their essential decision package recommendations and CIP projects, which are planned over the next 3 years only. We do want to note that the page numbers for CIP books are included, so you can look at the specific CIP information in your CIP book, as well as a map that shows the physical location if it's applicable. Any project that's marked with an asterisk indicates that the project includes funding in the current proposed budget year, 2020-21. We also include the funding sources for the project, if it's bonds, impact fees or grants, etc. And finally, if a project is general fund funded, a note is included if the project is considered to be one that may be held due to COVID-19 impacts. Also, we'll be passing down the first group is Kappa, and we had an issue on the printout where a different department was added in, so here's the update so you don't look at the wrong department and say, what happened to Matt and his Kappa group? This is the true Matt and his Kappa group, so we'll pass that down so you'll have the input. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you to start the department presentations. Thank you.
All right, council, we good to continue? If you need to take a bathroom break, please do so. So we'll just keep forging forward. I wasn't looking at you, Vice Mayor. Let's continue.
All right. Communications and public affairs. Let me hit on, whoops. All right, so we're not in the slide deck, so I'm gonna wing it here.
No, you use hit the little monitor looking one. Looks like a monitor.
Fun?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Matt. Okay, for Kappa, I'll hit on 3 of our accomplishments this current fiscal year. One is producing city council initiatives in the state of the city. Second, this year we worked with council and all the departments to launch the city's strategic framework based on policy direction from council. We also launched city branding as part of that and the community of innovation tagline that is now available. And thirdly, we've had a significant expansion in both the volume and the quality of our content creation in digital, print, and video form. A couple of COVID-related impacts. One, the high demand over these last 2 months for information, communication support, digital content, and virtual programs. Just to give you some idea, I'll touch on one area, our video area. Typically we do about 24 videos a month is what we've been averaging from July through February. In March and April, that number has nearly doubled. So we've produced 44 videos each month in March and in April. And a lot of that has to do with the virtual programming and need to get information out to our community. So we've had a high demand for various communication support, our phone bank materials, helping people to connect them with resources and information. So that has definitely been one impact. As a department, our services are continuing to function, whether staff is on site or staff is working remotely. But one impact has been the closure of city council meetings and events to in-person attendance. We talked about that a little bit last night. Personnel, we're a mighty team of 19.5 FTEs, about $2.6 million in personnel and benefits, and just over $1 million in operations and maintenance. We're all funded by general fund dollars. And then I'll hit on a few of our decision packages. First, our website hosting. This is an ongoing amount of $35,000. These funds would be used to cover costs for our service agreement for a Drupal website for the chandlerz.gov site. The city currently lacks the equipment to host this open source platform, and so we have a cloud-based hosting provider that also offers us redundancy and resiliency for the website. Website development and management. These funds would be used to cover costs for service agreements with our website development and content management support that maintain and enhance the site, certain amenities and custom features that are added. This year we added features related to our blog, the ability to filter and search park amenities and special events. The funds also would be used for social media aggregation that powers our website social media hub, and for website accessibility, compliance, and search engine optimization. Second, our digital media journalists temporary services. Our video division consists of 2 full-time staff and temporary staff. For the past 6 consecutive years, the City Council has approved one-time funding to supplement our full-time staff. The video team has produced more than 210 videos so far this year, plus 63 live streaming videos and more than 50 City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. Temporary staff funded through this request has accounted for 87 of those videos, not including the production assistance offered on the 63 live streaming videos. These funds would continue to cover costs for temporary staffing that enables us to produce live streaming videos, shoots in the field, and digital content for our website and social media. Our videos feature people and a community-first storytelling style that requires video shoots in the field and a lot of live streaming events. And then our cable access channel. Cable access channel, these are funds used to operate the government and educational access channels, including purchasing video equipment, software, and services. 50,000 of these funds are allocated to the Chandler Unified School District for the operation of their education channel, and this request is offset by license fees paid by Cox Communications and CenturyLink. Marketing and promotions, this one-time amount is for $25,000. These funds would be used to cover costs associated with printing the Cityscope newsletter in color and conducting marketing campaigns to encourage customers to use the city's paperless utility billing service. A portion of these funds also would be used to conduct digital marketing campaigns that promote community engagement and boost the reach of digital content on social media to share important news and information. And then our last request is $60,000. These funds would be used to replace the current audio system amplifier with new equipment that offers updated technology with redundancy in the event of failure. The current amp is the original amp when this facility opened in 2010, and it does lack redundancy. So if we had a failure, it is a single point of failure. This would take down our entire audio system in this chambers, including our broadcast audio. So we want to get it replaced. One-time decision for mayor and council office. Funds would be used to cover the first one, the public policy committees. These funds would be used to cover costs associated with participation in public policy committees at the national, state, and regional levels. And the second request for the U.S. Conference of Mayors would be used to cover costs for the annual dues for this organization. And that concludes our decision packages.
Council, any questions?
Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
You know, you've done an outstanding job, you and your team, is doing the social media, cameras. One of the areas, and I'm guilty, there's still about 20% of the population that likes the newspaper or print media.
Yeah.
Have we looked at any advertising and getting the message out through those media?
We have ongoing news and media relations activities. To be honest with you, we did inquire about the ability to expand our marketing budget, but with some of the financial impacts of COVID-19, we have tailored that back for this year, knowing that there's going to be less revenues likely coming into the city. We can have a targeted approach for certain campaigns and things that we want to do, print advertising to get community engagement or get other things that the city is trying to inform people of. We can also partner and work with other departments based on their budget availability to do certain marketing and advertising campaigns in print. We have great relationships. We have about a half a dozen newspapers in Chandler. We're a rare community, a community of about 260,000 people, and having that many publications. So we certainly value those community-based publications, and we have ongoing relationships with them, and they do a lot to help us keep the community informed. So where we have the means and the dollars to do those, we certainly will explore those.
So what was your print media budget?
I think we ended up cutting about $50,000 out of this. So that was both for print and digital in terms of our request. So our ongoing amount that we have is probably closer to $8,000 to $10,000 a year that we have available for either print or digital based advertising as our department. There's other departments that may have other marketing budgets and things, and they will deploy those based on where their audience is and their programs and services that they're trying to promote.
So a lot of these, as you know, Mayor, I'll follow up. A lot of these print companies are small,
Yep.
but yet very effective. So again, we talk about small businesses and looking at that. So can you do me a favor? Can you kind of summarize and capitalize what we're doing in the whole print media and where that's coming from? Like I said, as we start scaling back up, we want to be able to announce those in the print media as well as what we're trying to do and some of the programs and projects which will help make those venues or those events more successful. So
I mean, what we're doing right now, the majority of it is news content in terms of getting content into those various publications. There are certain departments that we'll work with where they'll have for example, if we're working with Public Works and there's a water conservation message, or we're working with community services and they're doing certain things to promote park and recreation amenities or programs. Most of our efforts in terms of any print-based advertising would be in those community publications.
Right.
We typically don't do print advertising in the regional publications.
Right.
But we also find effective to also leverage our digital platforms to be able to reach people as well. So digital is, for the most part, less expensive than some of the print outlets. So it really depends on the program and the campaign that we're conducting. We have done print advertising around the census. We had a print budget that was around the U.S. Census to promote that, people's participation in that. And then we've certainly done things to promote our utility billing through print, the state of the city, and some of the other larger events that the city has had. And other departments have a print budget as well, and they'll deploy
so
those in our community
I
publications.
understand. So I guess what I'm request is a summary of what departments have print budgets
Okay.
and see what that total is. Again,
We
a
can
lot of
work
these
with-
small newspapers,
Yep.
they obviously want advertisement, and content is one thing, but advertisement helps them go along. And particularly events that we want to promote is important, so.
We'll
Anyway,
work
just give
with-
me a total.
Yep, we'll work with those departments that have external-facing marketing budgets and compile a list of how much is going towards these various print outlets, and we can get that to you.
Any other questions? Councilmember McClemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you just elaborate and explain a little bit more of what this digital media journalist, what's the plan
Absolutely.
behind that?
Absolutely. So really with a lot of the news and information, this helps us to get news and information out into the community. So what she does is goes out and essentially interviews, finds people and stories to tell in Chandler, and then shares that through our various digital platforms. So she will go out and interview subjects. You've probably seen a few of those things that she's done over the course of this last couple of months with COVID, but she finds either small businesses, stories with residents, city services, and essentially does a short little news package or social media package that we can then promote and inform our community about whatever that program or that service or that individual, some of the things that they're doing in the community. It's helping to fill a news and information gap that exists right now with regional media outlets focused on other stories and other priorities. This is very community-based and allows us to feature some of those people and programs and services that are available in our community.
Okay.
Also on the live streaming it typically takes 3 people. Our video staff is 2. It typically takes 3 people to do those live streaming events because we have a person usually in our control room, and then depending on whether or not we're in the studio or in the field, we have then people on the camera, because most of our live streaming requires 2 people in the field to be able to shoot. And then we still have to have someone that is looking and controlling the switching of cameras and those kinds of production-based functions. So to do some of the live streaming events that I know a lot of departments and council enjoys doing, it does take multiple staff to accomplish those.
Okay.
That's it, Mayor. So unless there's any other questions.
Mayor.
I don't know if this is the right time to do this, and I won't take a whole lot of time. I just want to comment on how your team has stepped up during this crisis. It's been a key to what we are responsible for as a city, to communicate to our community what we are doing. And from the time direction came from mayor and council to really engage, I know that your team has been working overtime to get content out. I've seen it. The community has seen it. I've gotten feedback that we are communicative and that we are in front of people, and that's what they're begging for. So thank you.
Yep. And I'll just to further elaborate on Councilmember Kleiman's question, the temporary staffing is absolutely critical. I mean, we have to continue to operate this channel. We have a time allocated towards production of meetings like this and planning and zoning commission meetings, and having that temporary staffing really leverages our ability to get out into the community and feature some of these people and tell some of these stories that otherwise would go untold. And so that's really what our goal is with using temporary staffing, is to leverage the resources and skills that we have here, but having someone that's out in the field and gathering those stories and talking to those people and gathering that video and then putting all that package together. The video team works extremely collaboratively together on projects, and there's the pre-production phase, there's the actual going out and shooting, there's the editing, there's the post-production phase where we put all the graphics and all these things. So they work extremely collaborative together to be able to put together all these packages. You wouldn't be able to produce 40 plus videos a month without that collaboration.
I wholeheartedly agree. The communication is critical to our trust and transparency of delivering to our citizens. I was just curious. I wanted some more detail. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more
Okay,
for you.
all right.
Thank you. Am I hitting this? You got it? Okay.
Mayor? So this is the budget, this is what's being presented, this is the one-time packages, but I'm just wondering, it would be awfully nice if along the way, we heard about what potential one-time projects or adjustments could be made as the next year rolls out. So, in other words, some of us might see one thing as more critical or more crucial than another. And so I don't know whether staff could identify that, or if you all could do that, or maybe that's not the right question to ask. But I would say, in this case, Matt's area is pretty concise, but the digital media journalist seems like that might be a place where if you had to make a small cut, you might be able to do that. But, so I guess there hasn't been any plan to do that. Is there any chance of that?
Mayor,
City manager.
Councilmember Rowe, definitely what we are presenting today is what is included to be appropriated as part of the budget. As we go along, it is obvious we're going to have continual discussions about a number of these things, and not only these things that are before you today as possible adds or continuations of things, but also in just ongoing areas and services that we've had. So, you know, I would like to come back in August when we have our first quarterly meeting, and that's where, if I feel like it's appropriate, that we will be recommending what you're talking about today. So we can have some really good idea of what those projected revenues look like. We can certainly have a chance as an organization to take a look at possible cuts to services, what kind of impacts that's going to be and everything. So the directors today are not really going to be presenting except for what we're proposing for appropriation in the budget. And then we will have to continue to monitor and come back to you with any proposed cuts in services and those sorts of things. But you are exactly right that temporary one-time, those columns are the easier ones in some cases that we can make possible cuts from. But when you get into some of the other areas, we're funding with one time, but really need to be ongoing, to be quite honest. So we might not be able to make cuts in those areas. So would like the opportunity to come back to you that first quarterly meeting, and we'll start having those discussions. This is just for appropriation purposes today of what's included in your budget.
Okay, I know it's late in the game. I've suggested what I would like to see, and we'll just go forward.
Councilmember Rowe, that's exactly why that we are going to be scheduling these quarterly things to ask that question. So again, at this point, this is just a budget go forward, and the tweaks and the opportunities to do exactly what you're saying is being built into this process. But that'll be a comeback that we'll look at, as mentioned, quarterly and perhaps more frequently at that time. That's the whole process that we've talked about in terms of this year, looking at this process being totally different. That just because it's appropriated, it doesn't mean that if our income levels dip, that we will spend it. That's what we'll be doing at our quarterly gatherings. Does that make sense?
Mayor,
Okay.
Mayor, if I might
City
just
manager.
add one more thing. So Councilmember Rowe and the rest of the council members, just know if there is something that's operational that we can hold or save on, we're going to be looking at that anyway. We're not going to wait till a quarter's up and come talk to the council. I'm going to make those calls. If we can save money and do something in a different manner, we're going to be doing that no matter what. That's an operational decision that I can make. If it is a policy decision where we're talking cuts in services or specific programs, those are policy decisions that the council will need to make. But if there are hiring temporary workers for CAPA, that's a decision that we will be discussing before we start those contracts. All of those things have to be signed by me.
All right. Councilmember Wong.
Just very quick, we don't know when will be this COVID-19 end. State of the city normally is in January, right, or February. So we probably need to prepare that we are not going to have a public event, maybe do it online or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we will certainly be monitoring. I've already had some initial conversations with our video production supervisor to talk about if this continues on and we need to make modifications in terms of how we do this. The last 3 years, I believe, we have streamed the State of the City event. So Mayor, if you wanted to give your speech in an empty room and we're streaming it live, that could be an option. But we will certainly explore those options as we approach. But yes, typically it's in February of each year. And so, like I said, we've streamed it. We've done a number of things to be able to engage people that aren't physically on site. All of you have been interviewed, and we've done different things with the small business booth and everything last year. So we certainly want to engage people that aren't physically on site, and if we need to expand that, we'll certainly be prepared to do that.
So how much will that be affect on the budget?
So from a budgetary perspective, doing on-site, I mean, the Center for the Arts is essentially outside of the, if there's any rentals or those kinds of things, it's a very small amount. The main cost from us would be the personal services to be able to put together the videos and the speech that go along with the State of the City event. Outside of the event itself, it's usually only a couple $1,000. In terms of equipment rentals, if there's any food or beverage that's on site, it's a very small dollar event itself. It's more the staff time being able to prepare for the actual event.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor.
So I'm back to what Councilman Rowe was saying. I think that what I see this as, to kind of address your concern, because I know there's also a philosophical perspective that you have to have on the future. You know, when we talked about the J versus W versus an R, I don't know what that would mean, but I see this as like we said, an appropriated. It's a penciled out budget. Like every year, you know, I said with my family, this is what we plan. We can plan out a vacation, maybe not buy a new car, but then as you get closer before writing that check, you take an evaluation and say, okay, do we really have the revenues to back up this? So I do see this as we got to plan out our year, and then we watch our checkbooking and our income, and as we go, we can then decide whether at the time of, can we really write this check or go on that vacation or not? So that's the perspective I kind of see this as, is that we want to do an allotment, know where we're going to put our buckets of money, and then as we come there, and before we go and pull those buckets, we do a sanity check and make sure that we've got the money. So that's kind of my perspective that I see on this. And I you know, we kind of have a little different philosophy. I think we're going to be a V recovery, but If not, again, we're going to make sure we do those checks and balances along the way before we spend. So that's kind of the perspective I see on it too.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, we get to talk about this stuff sometimes, and I would say that what I've heard so far is very optimistic. And so I will, and so here it is, but I think we've got millions of dollars in here that, that I think we need to be, many of these items should be marked as COVID sensitive. And we are making a budget. And so this is the time to talk about this stuff, not someday or in a quarter or whatever. This is budget day. And we go out of these meetings sometimes and we hear, oh, that's already been talked about, that's already been settled. Well, anyway, I'm just saying this is a little rosier than I believe it will be, and others disagree. And so that's, I've asked what I've asked for, and we'll go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember McClemens, Councilmember Stewart.
The reality is we don't have a crystal ball on how this healthcare crisis is going to affect the financial crisis. We've heard about all the other letters. We haven't talked about the U-shaped recovery. U-shape's possibility. There's analysts on all sides of the equation on what our future looks like. This forced recession, if you would have asked us 3 months ago in January, we were adding jobs, 50-year record unemployment, economy was doing well, but most people felt that a recession was looming in the next 1 to 3 years. In fact, our own budget, we were planning for a recession. So the upside of a forced recession, what recessions are good for in a business cycle, is it shakes out bad business, and a good business, they work out their inefficiencies, and you reset, and then you can sustain a growth. And so that's the potential upside. We don't know what's going to happen with the virus and if it's going to come back in a big way. And if it is, this is going to be a difficult recovery. We don't know that. But what I'm hopeful for is we can toe the line between the worst and the best and have some flexibility. So if we do get the best, we don't kneecap our city, so we can be a leader, and that's going to really put us on on a stage to lead and attract businesses away from potential other cities that are on the struggle bus. And then if we have the worst case scenario, we have the flexibility to adjust along the way, so we can still thrive as a city. So we can thrive and survive either way. And so your points are great. I would like to continue today, at least having the thought process and discussion, either firm from a policy decision or whatnot, on what is flex and what is not. And so maybe we can achieve both. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Councilmember Stewart.
That's a great input, Councilmember McClemens, and I get what you're asking, right? It's sort of like we're baking everything into a budget, and then we're going to go back later and say, okay, well, this we can pull out, and this we can pull out, and this is probably a question for the city and manager and Dawn, is that if it's in there, if it's in the budget, we have the ability to flick the switch, right? I'm going to use some analogies here. If we don't have it in the budget, then we can't appropriate it later. Is that what you're?
Correct.
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, you are correct. Without us coming back and asking for council contingency as part of that $30+ million, we would have some flexibility there to use that cash if council would want to do that in the future. Otherwise, it would need to be appropriated, as you stated, through this budget process. And again, totally understand. And Dawn even said, we understand that this is optimistic. Possibly, we don't know. And so, I take the task of making sure that we come in under budget very seriously. And to everyone's point, we will meet the budget according to the revenues we receive.
Okay. So, and to Councilmember Rowe's point, I don't want to lean over and go, why are we buying trucks, right? Which I've done in the past. Why are we, when I see it on our agenda? And that's my biggest concern with this budget. If it is overly optimistic. Messaging that I'm getting from business owners, real estate landlords, national news, is that this is going to be quite a hiccup. And a 2% reduction in budget and a less than 10% reduction in revenue, incoming revenue, is probably very optimistic. But I get it, and what you explained makes sense. If it's in there, if it's in the budget, then we don't have to come back for every single thing to get a contingency to do it. So I understand. Thank you.
Council, again, what we are asking for, and we shared this earlier, shared this when we started, is we've never gone back and re-examined the budget quarterly, at least in the history that I've ever been here. And Councilmember Orlando, I assume it probably goes far beyond me. So we've built in input, and I will use it, the word unprecedented input into this budget, just because of all the concerns that we have. But if we don't appropriate it, then we have no option to spend. So to me, this is our top spending cap, and it's easier to cut once we've got it in there. And beyond the quarterly, as city manager said, we're going to get some updates a lot more frequently that'll give us the information. And we'll be able to make real decisions as we continue with this process. So I hear your concerns, but I think we've also built in the opportunities to be able to address these concerns and hit whatever budget numbers that we need to. So, Councilmember Wong.
I'm a little bit optimistic because like Don already showed us about where the money come from. I think the COVID-19 will be probably affect our revenues serious maybe next year or the year after. That's my assumption, but not really directly got hit right now. Maybe a little bit some affection, but not immediately. That's what I think. So our budget probably are still pretty safe, and especially we have been always use a very conservative approach to develop our budget. That's what I think. So I'm not that I'm not that worried about that. Yeah.
All right. Council, can we continue, or any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I just might have one
City Manager.
short thing. Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, I certainly understand your question. And don't think that what we have here in front of you today is completely done. If there are things here in the capital plan or in operations that the council as a whole sees that you just do not want to include in the budget, please let us know that. We will remove it.
All right, as we continue, just because Matt Burdick's time went from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, we don't want everyone else to get the same idea. Yeah. City Clerk. Matt, that was a poor use of your time. That's just.
Good morning, Mayor Hartke, council members. This has been a busy year for the city clerk's office. So with all of our accomplishments, there are 3 areas that did stand out. We conducted a 2020 special charter amendment election, and that special election was held in order to align our charter with the state's newly adopted consolidated election dates. And that election was held as a vote by mail election. The voter turnout was pretty good for a March election, 23.77%, with the overwhelming approval for the amendment to the charter. Where we spent a lot of our time this year was in records. We fully implemented the citywide records management program. If you'll remember last year when I was up here, I reported that we had designed and kicked off the citywide records management program. Well, today I'm so very happy to report that we have fully implemented that program, and we now have a records management program that is in compliance with state records laws. We've achieved the goals of our program by complying with all federal, state, and local laws. We have continually support department records liaisons. We maintain a citywide records inventory, identifying and safeguard essential records. We have records management training for all city staff, And one really important piece is that we continually assess and improve the efficiency of records management. And it's that last goal that brings me to another accomplishment this year. And that is the design of a citywide electronic solution for processing public records requests. So one of the benefits of taking an organization-wide approach to records management is that we get to interact and learn about records processes in all departments across the city. And then we're able to partner with IT to help match the need for automation with electronic solutions already utilized by the city. So currently, public records requests are received by departments individually with different processes and procedures. By creating a centralized public records request system, we can now include automated workflow for departments to efficiently track requests and respond to citizens very quickly. This program will also allow for oversight from management to see a comprehensive view of all of the records coming into the city. And this is really important, we were able to create the solution by using an application already owned by the city, so we did not have to go out and purchase another software program. So that was that's a big win for us. But this kind of brings us to one of the impacts of COVID-19, and that's that we were scheduled to have the public records request solution deployed this month. We have it designed and worked through all the workflows, but due to staff in all areas of the city being pulled in to implement solutions to handle the effects of COVID-19, electronic related records projects that were in the works have been kind of put on hold until we can all kind of come back and start to work on other things. But we are now starting to work on this project again and expect to deploy the solution by early June. Pretty excited about that. Another major records project that was delayed was the cleanup of the paper records stored at the central supply warehouse. And we're going to start to work on this again once more staff in other departments become available to go on site at central supply. So we have had some effects on some of the projects that we had in place. And then additionally, the passport application acceptance program was halted due to the COVID-19. And we do have a phased approach to reopen passports when the time is right. And a little bit of a silver lining in that is that we have a number of records projects within the city clerk's office that our employees have been able to work on during this time when they are not processing passports. So we've actually accomplished an amazing amount of cleanup work in our own department. So we're excited about that. There are 6 FTEs in the city clerk's office. Personnel and benefits is about $651,000 and $274,000 in operations and maintenance. It's important to note that that $274,000 includes $217,000 for funds for the upcoming 2020 candidate election. So our operations and maintenance is only about $60,000 a year without elections.
Dana?
Go ahead.
Question on that. So is that 217, is that intended for just, does that account for the 2 elections if there's a runoff, or is that typically only?
Yeah. So I'm
it
going to go
does-
on that in my decision package.
sorry.
And then we have a total operating budget of $926,000, and we are 100% funded out of the general fund. So our decision package, there is a one-time decision package to pay for the 2020 candidate election, and this is both the August and November election. And of course, if we're not required to do a runoff election in November, those funds will not be expended. I just want to close by thanking my staff for their hard work. They are true professionals, and none of this could have been accomplished without their dedication to succeed. They're a great group of people. If I can answer
Yes, I
any
know that
questions.
record management project was a major undertaking, and since, from first day, I think you've been trying to get that one tackled, and it's great to see that coming to fruition for the whole city. So thank you on that.
Thank you.
Any questions for the city clerk?
Vice Mayor.
But Councilman Stewart.
Thank you. Dana, thank you for the recap. Have you had any more conversations with IT and within your department for budgeting for blockchain? That's something I want to continue for a community of innovation. I think it fits within our brand vision and plan to continue down that path. Is that built into any of this?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart. Yes, we did quite a bit of research last year on blockchain, trying to figure out what it would take for blockchain for elections. hit a couple walls with some of the election processes because we don't run those. But it's something that I continue to work forward. There's not really money budgeted in this budget for that. But I don't think we're in the position yet to need money for that. It's trying to figure out the processes and how we would do that. So it's not been abandoned. I'm still working on it. And now with Sandeep here, or the new IT director, we can start to have those conversations with him too on how we would take a city approach to these elections and try to get around that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, City Clerk. City Magistrate.
Morning, Mayor Harkey, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to talk this morning about the court's budget. The Chandler Municipal Court's mission is to provide a fair and timely resolution of all cases while protecting constitutional and statutory rights and liberties. We provide a safe, fair, impartial forum. We enhance the safety of our community. We facilitate victim and community restitution and ensure the public's trust and confidence in the judicial branch. The true impact of the courts in our community is immeasurable and far-reaching. A fair and impartial court system is critical to a free democracy because the court is the branch entrusted with the responsibility to provide justice while safeguarding the rights and liberties of all citizens. I deeply appreciate your support and your understanding of how important an independent court is to our society. My goal when accepting the role as presiding magistrate was to ensure that the court continued to operate with the standards of integrity, fairness, and impartiality that our court is known for. In addition, I wanted to look at efficient and inventive ways to improve our citizens' access to the court. Courts should always be looking at ways to use technology and advancements to help fulfill our mission. It is important that we ensure citizens have full access to the courts in good times and the difficult times, such as we are facing today. I share with you 3 accomplishments. Okay. Okay. Got it. Okay. I share with you 3 accomplishments that our court has put into place to fulfill its mission. First, we have completed the implementation of online protective orders, which allows greater access to the courts for those in need of protection. Petitioners are now able to fill out an online petition through the statewide portal called AZ Point. Petitioners can access AZ Point from any phone or computer that has access to the internet. And this replaces the old paper system where a petitioner had to physically come to court to fill out the petition. If the petition is granted, the petitioner no longer has to arrange for service upon the defendant. The order is immediately transmitted to the proper law enforcement agency for service. These are monumental changes that remove significant barriers to vulnerable people seeking the court's protection. Second, during the recruitment process for my position, for which I'm honored to have been appointed, I said I wanted to spend some time carefully assessing and evaluating the court's organizational structure and operations. I did just that. I've identified several areas that are ripe for improvement that will move us into the future and increase our efficiency. After approximately 8 months, in February, I implemented changes that are designed to prepare the court to remove from a paper-based system to an electronic paperless system. And because of my deliberative and patient assessment and the time it took me to recruit some amazing forward-leaning management team members, I decided not to ask for some essential budget items this term. While it will take some time to transition to an electronic system, I believe we have to get it right. It is important that we prepare both organizationally and technologically today for the future. Third, this year was the first year that our court took part in 2 immensely successful annual events. Those events are designed to help some of our most deserving citizens, our veterans, transition back into a healthy civilian life We had a presence at the Glendale Stand Up for Veterans this year. We also had a major presence at the nationally recognized Maricopa County Veterans Stand Down. Because of my deep connections with that tremendous event, I was asked to co-lead the municipal court's participation. Myself and presiding Judge Kane from Tempe Municipal Court were in charge of handling most of the non-Phoenix municipal court matters at the stand down. This year, we helped over 2,000 veterans overall, with over 800 involving court matters. It was a tremendous success, and I was honored to participate. The COVID impacts. COVID-19 brought to the forefront the court's need to be adaptable while meeting our constitutional mandate. It created a sudden and urgent need to change our processes to allow for remote access to our proceedings. Our constitutional role requires that we provide an effectively managed, adequately funded judicial system that fully utilizes technological advancements to best serve the public. I would like to say resolutely that Chandler IT has gone above and beyond in helping us overcome some of the recent obstacles that we faced. They were instrumental in our implementing a rapid response to meet the Supreme Court's mandates. It is my goal to continue to work closely with Chandler IT to come up with solutions needed to help ensure the court has access to mandated technology. And I want to publicly thank you, Sandeep, and your IT team for your ongoing support. The Supreme Court directed us to significantly decrease in-person traffic starting in mid-March. I did so by adjusting the way we offered our services and actively promoted those changes. As a result, our phone and electronic customer requests increased by over 33%. That was just in March. I don't have the numbers for April yet, but I know it's increased even more. I want to take a moment to say that the Arizona Administrative Office of the Courts, working under the direction of the Arizona Supreme Court, is pursuing standardizing technological systems and functionality. They will expect all courts in Arizona to meet those standards within a certain time frame. When those standards are released, my management team will be working closely with Chandler IT to understand what we need to keep our court in compliance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time, consideration, and your ongoing support. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Councilmember Orlando, thank you for your support in the veterans. I certainly appreciate that. So on your one-time decision package, you're asking, I know this is funded out of the enhancement funds.
Yeah, that's coming out
But
of
what-
our dedicated court enhancement funds that we get from fees.
Right, so why is this a one-time decision package? Haven't we been doing this before? I guess I'm a little,
The Regional Veterans Court is an annual
Right.
donation that we have.
So
That
the-
should probably transfer over to an ongoing at some point, but it was more of a pilot for the past 4 or 5 years. And so I agree that
okay,
we
so
should.
you're just saying, this is just continuation of the one-time funding that we've done in the past?
Right.
Got it, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief Magistrate.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Councilmember Stewart.
can I get a copy of your preamble? Whatever, the first few paragraphs that you, will you email that to me? That was outstanding.
Sure, thank you.
City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm honored to stand before you to present the law department's budget for the upcoming year. It has been quite a year and changed dramatically when COVID-19 took over, but I still am happy to report that we have an amazing, hardworking, dedicated team of 32 people. As you know, our department provides we have 3 divisions in effect. We have our civil division that provides legal advice throughout the city to the mayor and council, management, and the departments. We have our prosecution team, and then we have our litigation and risk management team, all of whom have been very busy for the year. Okay, so for our top 3 accomplishments, as you know, we support the rest of the city, so we don't have necessarily our own independent accomplishments other than the prosecution, but I'm happy to report that we negotiated several complex legal agreements to continue the development of downtown Chandler, providing for parking and to help facilitate the economic viability of the movie theater and retail tenants in New Square. We also helped staff negotiate the Southwest Gas franchise that'll be coming before the council for approval, and then we'll be going to our voters for their vote on that. In our litigation and risk management group, we resolved 7 litigation cases this year through settlement or dismissal, one of which we were able to obtain a dismissal on recreational immunity. I think that was quite a coup for our team, and I'm very proud of our litigator for achieving that goal, or that accomplishment. Although we are not a revenue generating department generally, we are funded to help the rest of the city, we were able to successfully recover over $500,000 through recoveries from people who caused damage to city property. And also we recovered almost $100,000 from a class action regarding the purchase of liquid aluminum sulfate. And then from the prosecution side, we prosecuted approximately 3,300 cases to date with over 600 trials. We continue to be very involved in the specialty courts, Veterans Court and mental health courts, and we recently became part of the STOP program, which is a multi-jurisdictional program or effort to help effort to hold repeat shoplifters accountable in an effort to reduce recidivism. And we expect some great accomplishments through that program. We were impacted, not as dramatically as many departments, by the COVID-19. We're going to see it as we go through our insurance renewal process. As you're aware, we are self-insured up to $1.75 million, but we do obtain coverage for excess liability and for airport, crime, cyber, underground storage, and fine arts. We have been advised there will be an increase in our insurance premiums, and there may be insurance policies that are no longer available. The excess market is going to be dramatically impacted, is our understanding. So more to come on that. We also transitioned a lot of our team to teleworking for attorneys and staff. That was and remains a bit challenging, but we're working through it the best we can. It's hard to provide legal advice remotely, but it's also the safer way to do it at this time. And while the court is holding limited hearings, our prosecution workload has been dramatically reduced due to the fact that they're not holding the general criminal prosecution hearings. So we've had to redirect a lot of our prosecutional staff doing other things. So our budget, our proposed budget is around almost $9.7 million. The biggest part of our budget, of course, is personnel and benefits. And our operations and maintenance budget looks large, but remember that does include our risk fund of $4 million. And we also pay for the insurance premiums for the city for the year, which is in excess of $1 million, probably a little higher this year. We are funded primarily through the general fund. We do have a small part of that that is devoted to domestic violence victims. And then we have our self-insured insured liability fund. And we do not have any ongoing decision packages this year, but I do, again, want to give kudos to an amazing team. They have worked very hard this year and take on additional work and do so with a great attitude and try to respond as quickly as possible to the legal needs of the city. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our city attorney? All right, thank you. Next up, we have management services. What's that?
Mayor and Council, I'm happy to present on our department today. Our very first slide is 3 accomplishments and 2 notable COVID impacts. The first one I'd like to mention for an accomplishment is in the winter of 2019, we completed a successful general obligation bond and excise tax revenue obligation sale. Very low interest rates. They fund our city infrastructure projects and has allowed us to continue through with maintaining our infrastructure. Additionally, we reaffirmed the AAA general obligation bond credit rating from all rating agencies. As every time we sell bonds, we get thoroughly reviewed on all aspects of our financial, how we handle our finances, our policies, and all the, our comprehensive annual financial report, how that looks, everything about it. And again, reaffirming the AAA bond rating, and that's a big part due to, of course, your leadership. Additionally, we completed the priority-based budgeting update to identify the costs of city programs and services and align them with our city council goals. That's a very large effort and allows us to really view our programs and services in a different way. Our budget summarizes everything at a cost center level, but it truly identifies every service we provide to our citizens or internally to our departments. It's very helpful data for us. When it comes to COVID impacts and actions, the very first bullet wouldn't surprise you. Revised the forecast and incorporated that into the proposed budget. And secondly, as discussed last night, we closed our walk-in services for utility services and tax and license, and are promoting online email and phone customer service in those areas. And the call volumes have not let up. So our staff continue to work in the office in both of those areas and have been serving our customers to the best of their ability through this. Tax and license, we have some folks working from home, but the front counter folks remain on site. Okay, our department is 9.3 million. We have 71, and we have a quarter of a person as well, a part-time person in there. So almost 72 people that support our operations. And then on the next page, that is funded mainly through general fund, but we do also provide assistance to the Workers' Comp Self-Insurance Trust Board on our financial reporting, as well as the Medical Self-Insurance Trust and Uninsured Liability Fund, which is our environmental cost center, and that is fully paid for out of our out of that special self-insurance fund. I apologize. Additionally, the Management Services Department manages the department called non-departmental. The non-departmental department, the detail of what's included in there is on page 30. I know it sounds crazy, but it's on page 30 and 31. It gives a little more detail on what's included in there. But these are costs that aren't linked to any one specific department. So for instance, besides what's in general fund, the other funds include in our self-insurance fund, the budget for claims. Those are large budgets that allow appropriation to pay the claims for medical, workers' comp, and so on. That resides in non-departmental for us. Okay, so decision packages. This year, I submitted one decision package, and the city manager pulled it at the end. So I have no no packages. And what's interesting about that, it was one to help us more easily prepare our budget document. So maybe that you'll see that later. Otherwise, I will be talking about some decision packages on page 55 and 59, the details of those. The first two that are presented here are in our self-insurance funds. Workers' comp and health, our trust documents require an audit every year, and it's just the delta in the price increase for that audit. One-time decision packages, this is again in the non-departmental fund. Citywide banking fees, typically it doesn't cost us. We have our JP Morgan contract. The fees that are provided typically are covered by interest earnings. Unfortunately, our interest earnings are extremely low, so we anticipate having to pay over and above those. So we are asking for a $30,000 appropriation to pay our banking fees. Next, we have priority-based budgeting, which we completed this year, but we would continue in a second phase going into 2021. And there is a $13,000 cost for the software that's associated with that.
Here. Don, on that priority-based budgeting software, I remember last year when we got that. I love it that we're using it, but it really kind of messed up what we thought was a priority based on where it ranked public safety and all that stuff. Did you guys did you put that back out for RFP or what, how is that going to get fixed? Because that's bad data out.
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, we did have some issues with the data we didn't necessarily agree with it. Some of it is how the goals are organized, how our council goals are, because they feed up into these goals, and everything's, I guess, weighted the same between every goal. And we had additional conversations with the consultant about really identifying upfront what those core services are for the city so that we could weight them higher, so that in the end our results would make more sense. That effort took place, and the results that we have now are more in alignment with what we would have expected on our first draft of the priority-based budgeting. So and that's why we're proposing continuing with this. I think it's a great way of looking at our programs and services and being able to cost them and know exactly how much time and effort is going into them. And they were able to work with us to rectify that.
Okay, so it's fixed.
It is.
Thank you.
Short answer. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Whoops.
What is your comment? Oh, I thought you were done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. The third one is a request for $50,000 for a franchise fee audit. So we have some different franchise fee contracts in the city of Chandler that's one of our general fund revenue sources. And it comes in from APS, Air Products, Southwest Gas Corporation, Cox Communications, CenturyLink, and Western Broadband. And again, those agreements within them have a stipulation that we can audit them at given points in time. It's been quite some time since we performed a franchise fee audit, and it really is best practice for a city to do those every so often. So we'd like to start doing those, I guess, on some schedule of frequency as we move forward over the next few years. This would be our first in quite some time. Okay. And finally, we have a one-time decision package for $14,000. This is paid out of the system development fees or impact fee capital funds. And this is to make sure that we're in alignment with an Arizona statute that requires us to audit our impact fee program every other year. And already, 2021, we have to do this audit looking back 2 years, 18-19 and 19-20. And then that audit results get posted online for our development community to show our program. And that is all I have for management services. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Vice Mayor.
So on the banking fees, so the reason we're doing a one-time on that is because we believe the interest is just not going to, we're not going to be high enough in order to. So is that typically an ongoing fee that, because we know we're going to have to pay that every year, banking fee, it usually is covered by interest, and how does that work?
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez, it is a fee that is paid every year, but it gets net against the income that's in our swap account that gets generated. And the problem is when the interest rates have fallen as low as they have, we don't have an appropriation to pay fees because typically the interest covers the fees. And the last few years we've had to bring this forward time and time again, that delta between the net interest and expense. We need an appropriation to actually pay it. We were almost back to even before the Fed dropped the rates 2 more times. Again, we were almost there to be making exactly what we needed to cover our fees directly. And then the drop happened again, so I ended up having to put this package in again. But if the rates continue to stay low, it's probably something we should shift to ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Councilmember Lindo. I'm sorry. Are you done, Vice Mayor?
No, we kind of ruined it. It was going to be a joke about our AAA bond rating, but I do want to say that I mean, we've had AAA bond rating now from all three for what, 20 years plus-ish?
Gosh, it's been before my time, so I'm not quite sure how long it's been. I have to look up that.
Won't say how long you've been around then. But is there a way to get a better, like a gold AAA? Because we've had it for so long. Is there a better than a gold AAA? We can get like a,
It kind of feels like a gold AAA when you continue to maintain it in a time like this. So I'm gonna look at that as a gold star.
Councilmember Orlando.
Let me understand what this is, and again, I don't want to dwell on $14,000, but I guess it's more the philosophy here. We're putting money in the bank, right? And they're charging us $14,000? I guess I'm confused what this.
Councilmember Orlando, are you talking about the one, which
the
one are you
one-time-
speaking
The
about?
one-time $14,000 bank.
For the
bank-
biannual impact fee audit?
No, I'm sorry, the
30, that's the
number,
30.
the 30.
Oh, the 30, okay. Yes, for the citywide banking fees. So this is the fees in our JP Morgan banking contract for our operating funds. There's a lot of different services that are in there. It's probably a good 25-page document for all of those services. Every transaction has some sort of a fee associated with it. And at the end, every November, we do a reconciliation of the fees and the interest earnings that have been generated from the account, our operating account. And in this case, because interest rates are so low, we end up having to pay
Right.
the banking institution.
So how much money we have with this bank?
At JP Morgan, they manage our operating transactions, so we don't actually hold funds. It's just really what we keep in our operating, it's a base amount we keep in our operating fund. We keep the majority of our investments between two investment firms, PFM and Wells Capital, manage our investments. So we try to keep that as low as possible since it earns little to nothing at this point in time, and we put our investments in and try to invest those at a higher rate.
I don't want to dwell on it, but it seems a little bit charging us that much money, and we're putting how many millions into this bank?
Yeah, Councilmember Orlando, I totally understand what you're saying. They've been a very good partner, but we do go out for a banking RFP, and they are actually at a cost that is competitive with the other banking institutions.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. Next.
Morning, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to present the proposed development services budget for next year. And first, I will start with our accomplishments. In the categories of technology, last year you funded an innovative text message service for scheduling inspections. We implemented the service in December, and now we're getting 15% of our requests through that service, and the utilization is growing. We are the first in the state to offer that service and among the first in the country. We had some planning initiatives in the past year as well. We held the joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We got direction on a number of items, and the first batch of proposals for ordinance changes is coming soon. We also initiated the Air Park Area Plan update recently, and it has a projected completion date at the end of the calendar year. In regards to customer service, to date, we have issued 4,650 construction permits, and growing every day, and conducted 23,500 inspections for a total valuation, permitted valuation of $840 million. In regards to the COVID effects on the department, I talked a little bit about this last night. We had greatly expanded our digital utilization, but still have walk-in customers. So we reduced access to walk-in services, then later closed the public counter to walk-in customers. We did allow drop-off and pickup in the lobby for a while, then went to appointment only and closed the lobby. For the second effect, this may in fact be a silver lining. We have strongly encouraged in the past digital plan submissions, and have seen an increase in digital plan submissions due to this rather than paper submissions. At this point in time, over 90% of the incoming plans are digital. It was high before, but it's certainly higher now. We have conducted meetings with outside customers digitally rather than in person, and via phone or email, and many of the staff are working remotely. We'll talk about our budget for personnel and benefits. For 82 full-time employees, about $9.2 million. For operations and maintenance, almost $635,000 for a total of $9.8 million. That includes the integration of transportation engineering that occurred last year. And here's a breakdown of where the funds come from. $9.1 million, or 92.5%, comes from the general fund. And then from HERF money, about $736,000, or almost 7.5%. I'll talk now about our proposed decision packages. First, for ongoing, we are requesting $1,800 per year for large monitors. We plan on purchasing 9 30-inch monitors for civil inspectors and some of our reviewers. This supplements their laptops and desktops. As I said, most all plans are now coming in digitally. And actually, the picture, there are images on the bottom of the screen, the one on the left. These are actual before and after images. The one on the left was taken in 2016, just before we implemented electronic data review. The one on the right was taken recently. You can see just one lonely plan, paper plan, in the pigeonholes. Right now, most plans, digital plans, are usually drawn at a 24-inch by 36-inch format. So imagine something about this size and trying to read it on a screen this size. So it's difficult and inefficient to read these plans on small screens. So the large screens will allow viewing plans much more efficiently. So the department will buy the monitors. We're just asking for funds for ongoing. We'll talk about our 2 one-time decision packages. The first one is something we request and have received every year. As for plan review and contract services, this is used to support consistent customer services during unforeseen circumstances, such as spikes in workload or long-term vacancies. We've had this in our budget before, and we have utilized it. Lost the screen. Okay, and then the last one I will talk about is traffic safety enhancements. This is part of a program to evaluate traffic safety elements in the right-of-way. These can include bicycle, pedestrian, vehicle volumes, speeds, and crash history. This fund would support traffic studies, safety enhancements, perhaps such as speed reader boards, traffic calming measures, and pavement markings. They could also fund improvements such as mitigating existing traffic concerns or improving the effectiveness of existing components. It could also allow for replacement of existing traffic safety infrastructure. So this concludes our budget and budget requests. I'd like to end by thanking and recognizing the Development Services staff for keeping our operations going. Any questions?
Any questions, Council? All right, thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Let Matt get this up here. All right, so I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. For our accomplishments in the City Manager's office this past year, obviously with Mayor and Council approving the strategic framework last May, we have overseen the citywide implementation of the Council's strategic framework, and I look forward to reporting out for the second time in June. We have evaluated performance measure software and began work on performance dashboards. Stephen Turner in my office has been out, visited with a number of cities that are working under some of these various platforms. And we have also had several companies come in and display their performance dashboards and how they go about using those. And when we looked at the cost of those, Mayor and Council, they were some upwards of a couple of $100,000. What we have found is that through Derek's team, we are able to accomplish many of these things at relatively zero cost. And so we are moving forward with building performance dashboards, which I'll be excited to show you some of the drafts of what these are going to look like as we get into my next semi-annual report out on the Council Strategic Framework. We actively monitor federal, state, and local legislation for impacts on the city revenue and our services, and Ryan and his group definitely leads that. Appreciate all they do there in keeping us protected from some of those decisions. COVID impacts, I'm just going to leave that as is. I think you heard enough from me last night about COVID impacts. In our, looking at our budget highlights, in the city manager's office, we have 7 FTEs. I laugh when I see that because actually I have 1,613 FTEs. But anyway, we are 100% general fund, and the city manager is not proposing any decision packages for the city manager's office. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions? Thank you. Human Services.
Morning, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to present the Human Resources budget for this year. So during this fiscal year, HR staff has accomplished many things. It was difficult to just pick 3. But through good management in partnership with our employee-based healthcare task force, 2020 marks the 6th year we've been able to offer a no-cost, high-deductible health plan to our employees and their families. It is also the 4th year we have not increased premiums to the traditional plans. I'm proud that we offer great benefits while keeping costs to the city and employees manageable. Second, as part of a Smart City initiative last fiscal year, we implemented a new talent management system, better known as LEAF. During this fiscal year, we are implementing the performance management module of the system, allowing for an electronic process for performance reviews. We've started with our partners in both police and fire, rolling it out to them, and if they're happy, we're happy. So we are now rolling it out to our other departments. Our plan is to finish the training by the end of the fiscal year. This may be slightly delayed as we are looking at different ways to train departments in the current climate and our need for social distancing. Thirdly, we continue to focus on recruiting and retaining the best talent in Chandler. Pre-virus, the employment landscape was very different, and at times we recruited 2 or 3 times for vacant positions. A cross-departmental recruitment committee was established. Preliminary work in HR has included a review of current processes, best practices, change in the marketing of positions, new ways to recruit, attract, and retain different generations. With our new landscape, the focus of the committee remains the same, but our tactics may shift based on our current circumstances. Boy, has life changed since COVID-19 in HR. We're always happy when we can do one non-COVID related item a week in HR. So 2 impacts. Our organizational development staff was redeployed, and in collaboration with CAPA and our IT partners, the creation of the COVID-19 hotline occurred very quickly. The hotline, or 299, is for external citizens and business questions related to COVID-19. 44 employees were trained, and in the first 2 weeks, it was centrally located in the IT training room. We now have 29 employees that have the hotline mapped to their workstations, so they're able to answer calls while still continuing to work in their department. We do have the ability to map additional phones if the call volume increases, which we anticipate may occur when new executive orders are issued by the governor's office. One of our focuses always in the division is our employees' health and well-being. Quickly, we needed to make changes and enhancements to our benefit programs and increase communication to our employees. In our benefit plans, we made modifications such as no cost share for diagnostic testing for COVID-19, no cost share for telehealth sessions and increased capacity for that. We changed our short-term disability elimination period, or shortened that, to help our employees. In our deferred compensation plan, we are allowing access to loans of those funds, although we don't encourage that. We do know that there is financial impacts out there with this virus. And then we quickly put together items based on the CARE Act with the emergency paid sick leave and FMLA changes. So like CAPA, we are small but mighty. We have 23 employees. Our personnel and personnel and benefit budget is a little over $2.7 million, with our operation and maintenance budget of about $902,000. We are 56% funded by the general fund, and then we have 3 self-insurance funds that we manage: workers' comp, the medical self-insurance fund, as well as short-term disability, which some of our funding resides with those. I am asking for one ongoing decision package, and that is an increase to the base budget of our workers' comp excess insurance premium. We purchase excess insurance for our workers' comp trust, and we have not increased that base budget since fiscal year 17-18, but we've continued to see those premiums rise. So this is the delta, and we actually may see additional increases as Kelly spoke to with the impacts of COVID. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I want to thank you. It's pretty unprecedented to have insurance rates not rise, in the duration that we've seen that happen. And it's been a great benefit for our city. And I want to thank you and our staff for managing that well. That has helped our employees. Vice Mayor.
I think that's the 10th time you said unprecedented now. Just keep
Good track.
I'm using it unprecedentedly.
The increase of the workers' comp fund, what's that percentage increase is? You know?
I don't have the percent in front of me. We could figure that out really quickly.
Sorry, and you said this is it's been creeping up, but now we're just, now having to add it into our ongoing, just kind of wondering if
It has, as an example, through the mayor, Council, or Vice Mayor Lopez, I'm sorry. We are tired this morning. In fiscal year 17-18, our premium was $275,000. Our premium that we just paid in fiscal year 19-20 was $350,000. We're waiting for our increase for the new fiscal year. I anticipate that it is going to rise at least 5%. They are looking at the impacts of legislation such as the cancer presumptive bill and some of our experience. So those continue to add to this.
Okay, so you're at least covering sounds like at least more than a 10% increase, because the last one was, that's what, almost 25% increase. So pretty hefty increase. Okay, thank you.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Huang, yes, this would increase our base budget. If we needed to come back and ask for additional ongoing monies because the premium outpaced what we asked for, we would do that next year. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Economic development.
Micah, I'll wipe off for you. Yeah.
This is like so funny. Like, of all the things we learned about in elementary school, the last thing I actually thought I would ever have to put into effect was, the lesson on cootie. So, here we are, 40 years later. So through the third quarter of 19-20, economic development was having a very successful year. There was a number of notable expansion and attraction projects. Insight's corporate relocation of their headquarters out to the Air Park area was very significant. Clarivate, which we recognize at the Mayor's State of the City address, as well as a lot of other projects. Through the current quarter, we're wrapping up Q3 report right now. We're looking at about 5,800 new jobs for the city of Chandler. So we've got one more quarter to go. We've got a number of projects in our pipeline that we're aggressively pursuing, and hopefully we can add to that tally to round out the year. One of the things that we've been working on in partnership with ASU for quite some time now was the repositioning and opening of the former tech shop space into Hub 249. It was a long, arduous process, and we really couldn't have done it without the help of ASU and their team. Bankruptcy is never quick and it's never easy, but able to get through that, get that project re-going to help support our maker community, which is such an important component of our entrepreneurial development. Last thing on a notable accomplishment is the creation and execution of several strategic plans within economic development with council's input. We really appreciate that. As we go forward with COVID-19 related challenges, we are working on new tactics within that strategic plan to make sure we can keep our project pipeline, both on the new development side as well as physical company side, full. on the impacts, obviously, businesses are struggling. We know that. Everybody up here knows that. And so we are continuing with our economic development efforts, really looking at it from two perspectives. One is the economic development as usual, business attraction, business startup, retention, all that good stuff. And then we've got this little triaging of COVID-19 things for our Chandler-based businesses. And so we're working through that. A lot of it comes down to education, working with our partners across the state and region to get timely and accurate information out. What we've seen is a proliferation of misinformation that is generally confusing our businesses. And so we're really working to make sure that accurate information gets out and people are making wise decisions. Economic development, we are 7.5 employees. We split a part-time admin. Personal benefits, $926,000, operation and maintenance of $718,000 for a total of $1.6 million. Completely general funded. Decision package and budget highlights. One-time decision packages. We come to City Council every year for ongoing funding for the Innovations Incubator. Right now, we're requesting $250,000. Last year, we came before you requesting one-time funds for digital marketing for business attraction. We have seen significant amount of traction in that space. We are getting a high return on our investment and being very judicious, so we're coming back requesting funds as well. And then every year we come to you for the 100% offset for the Science Spectacular event. This event continues to grow. Participants are now asking, can they help fund this? So this number is obviously going up, but it's not an impact to the city at all because it's funded by our partners. One-time decision package is coming out of the West Chandler Place branding. As we continue to focus on redevelopment within the city, we need to have iconic locations. And this is the kickoff for that project, which was announced by the mayor at the State of the City address. And then for our 3-year total on CIP, we have our infill incentive plan of $500,000, which we are not adding to this year. Answer any questions.
Councilmember McClements.
Micah, we discussed the plan. Did you fill the plan? Are we still executing the plan without a decision packet on the partnership with CUSD for the North Chandler attraction and branding? Do you know where that's at?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Clemens, we are still working with CUSD on that. Putting together the budget, obviously CUSD is taking a closer look at their expenditure, so we're in communication with them and we're trying to find alternative avenues to continue to move that project forward. We don't have a decision package in at this time, but we have maybe a bucket of money that we can take a look at in the future.
If they agree to commit and they can make funds for it.
Correct, yes, sir.
And then my other question is the digital marketing, what was the number last year that we did?
10,000.
Okay, so this is an increase. Okay, excellent, thank you.
Mayor. Micah, thank you very much, even for the work you did last night. Appreciate it. Hey, just a couple of things. On page 46, general government, and maybe I'm reading this wrong. You said 7.5. This is reflecting 6.5. Is there an addition to that?
What page, excuse me?
I'm on 46 of the general government. FTE 6.5, and I think you said 7.5. Is there something wrong with this page, or?
Split a admin assistant.
Right.
With.
Right, and that's in here.
Tourism is the other position. This on page 46. This is just Fund 1520.
Okay,
we have another one for tourism, which is the
that's where the 7 Thanks. Okay, yes, appreciate that. You had we did a good job last night in setting us up for economic development, what we're doing, your strategies. So I have a just general question for you, and it's just been bothering me for a little bit. If I have a CIP program and say it's $1 million, I just as a starting point, what's a revenue impact to the city? And whether it's a street project or building a building or something like that. Do you have an idea on that, or?
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, approximately for every $1 million in building construction, it is a one-time revenue generation to the city of about 17,000. On average, creation of one-time job of 11 positions within the construction industry. Ongoing is about 400 in property tax collections, depending on levies and rates and all that stuff.
Okay, so just to clarify, 17 on one time, about 11 positions, and then 400 property tax, that type of stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
And then is there an incidental, like those 11 workers, if they're lunch or something like that? I think the word, what do you use that word?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando. So that 17,000 I referenced includes the indirect induced revenue generation as well.
Okay, so that includes material, cost of material, taxes on material, things like that.
That's
Okay,
fully loaded.
thank you, appreciate it. Thanks, Mayor.
Mayor? Thank you. So we've talked a lot about our financial, thank you. We've talked a lot about our financial position and our sustainability story. How are you going to leverage that with, how are you going to leverage that news with the rest of, the West Coast, if you will, with the digital marketing package to let them know that, hey, we're good. This is a safe place to relocate, those kind of things. Is there a plan for that?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, that's a really good question. And that's what our team's working on right now as we update our tactics within our economic development strategic plan surrounding marketing to get that message out. We take pride in the AAA bond rating, on the city side from the low cost of borrowing we get, but that also has a very clear indication to our private sector partners, like we are a well-run and efficient city. And so as part of that communication strategy, whether it's digital or in person, those are things we continue to highlight and push, and we tailor it based on the project, on specific cases, and then for general marketing, it's kind of just that high level, this is the benefit of having a financially and politically stable operating environment.
Thank you. So one of the things that I'm hoping, and maybe you already have this planned, but you had discussed a top 50. And how often are you going to be checking in with that top 50 to find out what those quarterly revenue losses or even monthly revenue losses will be? What's that plan look like? And will that be reported to Dawn's team for our quarterly reports?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, I believe that was an item Dawn referenced last night in tracking sales tax collections. So I'll defer that question over to Dawn.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. The top 51, we have to display that information in categories because it is confidential information at a taxpayer level. So we really legally can't go back and start asking them questions regarding their tax filings. So we're looking at it like all the financial institutions together that are in the top 51, all the manufacturers together, and that's how the information will be displayed. So we really don't have a mechanism to go back and dig into their finances and understand it.
Okay. And last question is, do you get reports on the analytics from our social media activity? So we're making that investment, we're doing a little bit of increase. Are you seeing how that funnel is working? Are people being attracted back to our site? Are they generating leads for your team?
Great question. Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, absolutely. Our team tracks our metrics, engagements, clicks, and flow through, and we're working with CAPA to further improve our mechanism tracking. So if we're putting $500 into a campaign on Twitter or LinkedIn, we want to be able to see if we're hitting the right folks. And so we're working with CAPA and IT to get Google Tag Managers completely optimized continuously. And so that's something we yes, do very often.
Okay, can I see a copy of that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up comment from Councilmember Stewart. It does seem that obviously part of our strategy too for reaching out involves our commitment with GPEC, attacking the West Coast, as well as I'm really hopeful and that perhaps our response and measured response to closures, even with COVID-19, really speaks to companies and expansions, whether they're in Austin, Texas, or Santa Clara. These are the types of things that I hope that we raise some eyebrows in a positive way with this too, but I know that's too early to tell. on those things, but I think we've established a good credibility as a stable government and a stable city to put your investment and expansions in. So, Councilmember Wong, you had a question.
Yes, I saw your one-time decision package about West Chandler Place branding implementation. That's only $25,000. I live in West Chandler, so I'm glad about that. But I do notice that our North Chandler, especially the retailers business, has been not very good. So maybe next time you may consider thinking about something on North Chandler.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Councilmember.
Yeah, I just feel the priority should be in North Chandler instead of Western Chandler.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Wong. 3 years ago, we implemented the Uptown Chandler Place branding, and we've slowly been investing in that program. Right now, we're at the point with that program where we're really working with our private sector partners in engagement and with development services to increase the placemaking through our building. So as new projects coming in, coordinating with planning to incorporate design standards in specific projects that help elevate that brand and theme is something we're looking to do. As it relates to West Chandler, this is the kickoff where we're currently coordinating with the different stakeholder groups, so private and public entities as well as residents to really get that brand implemented. So this is really the first foray into West Chandler, but North Chandler, Uptown Chandler really does continue to be a major priority. We've heard it from mayor and council for several years now, and it's really reflected in the council strategic planning documents.
Understood. Thank you.
Council, any additional questions? All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Building and facilities, Mike.
Councilman, I don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting most of you. My name is Mike Hollingsworth. I'm the Fleet and Facilities Manager, better known as the new Chris Kircher, so to speak. So, the phrase. As you know, Building and Facilities Division is responsible for 51 city-owned buildings and providing various maintenance and duties to 22 additional facilities. That's over 1 million square foot of building space that we maintain. Oop, backwards.
Just click buildings and facilities, and then click the screen in the bottom right-hand corner.
All right, there we are. Notable accomplishments for facilities rather, is senior center improvements and roof replacement. That would conclude one of several roof replacements that were accomplished this year. New bay doors at the Fire Station 7. Again, that's an ongoing continuous project with the fire stations to replace several other door assemblies. First phase of city buildings assessments was completed also this year. Notable COVID-19 impacts, as we discussed last night. We initiated additional disinfection process to treat city facilities and work areas. That's in addition to call-outs as well. We're now scheduled to do comprehensive disinfection twice a month through most, if not all, city facilities. Continue to manage the supply chain depletion for disinfection products. I'm also a part of the EOC with logistics section in which we are trying to keep up with the demand of the supply chain in providing sanitation, not only supplies, but also sanitizing supplies for meetings like this. Financial highlights and operating proposed budget. Personnel and benefits, 3.3 million with a 44 FTE. As you know that half of that staff is dedicated to the custodial functions. The other half is primarily maintenance. And operation and maintenance of 4.4 million. And as you know, we're generally funded 100% through the general fund. Decision package for building facilities. And ongoing decision package for HVAC maintenance contract of $80,000, which is actually $10,000 less than it was in the previous year. Facility maintenance increases of $102,000 and citywide security enhancements requests for $50,000 as one-time decision packages. And for the CIP, existing building renovations and repairs of $3.7 million. Again, that's various improvements to all the facilities within the city. Again, to continue the fire station bay doors project with Fire Station 8, and facilities and parks asphalt maintenance, which is a shared fund between facilities and parks. CIP, General Government Building Facilities, Building Security Cameras project over the next 3 years. It's basically $150,000 per year for the next 3 years. Community Center building renovations and Senior Center building renovations. Building Assessment Phase 2. Again, this is to continue. We did 54 buildings this year in that assessment, and we continue to do an additional 19.
Mike, I apologize. Before you leave that slide, you can leave this one up. But just for mayor and council, on Monday, we did discuss a possible A/B list for capital projects. So where you see that these things may be held due to COVID-19 impacts, that's where that is coming from. That's that list.
And I'd like to reiterate that what the city manager had emphasized earlier, although things are allocated and appropriated, we are still looking at each and every project with some custodial responsibility. Energy management system upgrades, it's $150,000. Really the key aspect of the energy management system upgrade is from an IT standpoint, typically building systems management is a computer function, but it's also tied to our network, so it offers a potential gateway for hackers to come into the network. So this hardware upgrade really protects us from that happening. And then police and courts security fence upgrades. I think that does it for fleet.
Thank you, Mayor. On the fencing upgrades for police, and that's relatively important. This is probably more for discussion up here, since it's a one-time thing. It seems a little more important maybe than some of the things we're seeing come over the desk. And I don't want to prioritize based on every department has its needs, but that's something that seems like needs to happen. Safety is the #1 responsibility, I think, for a municipality, and so it's something I'd love to maybe reconsider with staff and hear y'all's feedback.
So again, this is in the budget, and this is probably when these show up in this is probably a good discussion for our next quarter to see where we're at with things. And, you know, I at that point, once we kind of have a good picture of where the dollars are being impacted, that would be a perfect conversation, in my opinion, for that time.
Mayor, if I may add to this, Mike did go past the 50,000 that we have. I mentioned last night, we did, I put together a team that included Mike, Stephen from my office, someone from police department, and others to go out and actually look at all of the departments from a safety perspective. When that came back off the top of my head, I want to think that we have about $2.4 million in safety improvements that need to be done. This particular project was brought forward by courts. It includes a gate, a new gate, which I would definitely say is needed over there, and then to raise the current fence that's been in place for many years around that. And so this is, again, I didn't even include the rest of the, what would that be, $2.3+ million that's needed elsewhere in the city is not even in your budget at all. So I would welcome those discussions as we move forward. But this one, as the mayor points out, is in there for next year. Just recommending that it's cash funded. So we recommend, for the most part, recommending that we hold that to our share of revenue coming in.
If I may add, there's a slide that depicts what the existing gates actually look like, and they're just simple drop-down pole gates. So the security is very, very minimal at best. For building and facilities, fleet is next. Any other questions?
Stuart, did you have any others related?
So are some of that 2.4 million that you're referencing, is some of it's not cash funded, some of it's bond, some of it's
No, it's not even in
all
there.
cash?
It's not even in there. We don't have the money for it. So they will go unfunded, and it's not even part of your program.
All right, so it's okay.
Councilmember Huang.
Your ongoing decision package, HVAC maintenance contracts.
Yes, sir.
So that means if it's a little bit like insurance, something like that. So if anything is broken, they will just repair it with no extra cost, or we need to pay some extra cost on it.
Through the mayor, Councilman Hong, this is actually a preventative maintenance program. So
Yes.
it's actually a contract in which we have a scheduled maintenance that's performed on the HVAC system.
So what's including in the maintenance? If saying that we have system broken, where we need to pay extra for it, or we don't, it's covered?
There are certain items that are within the scope of preventative maintenance where, say, for example, in this building, you would have the organization would come out and perform a quarterly inspection every quarter, and also do an annual inspection that would take care of routine maintenance. If there was a component that actually failed during that time, that would be an additional charge.
Okay, so we still need to, okay, got it. So it's just like, anyway, I understand.
If you were to take your vehicle into the dealership for an oil change, that would be a preventative maintenance function that you would do on your vehicle. But if you drove it down the street and the belt broke, you would still have to go take it back to get it fixed.
Okay.
Council, any additional questions? All right, on to fleet.
Again, fleet, oh, I'm sorry, do that again. So the fleet division provides preventative maintenance obviously for the fleet and also additional equipment, which totals over 1,224 pieces of equipment and vehicles. To date, the 2019-2020 accomplishments, 0 accidents attributed to equipment failure. We procured the faster fleet management software. This year had begun that implementation along with the help from IT. We replaced 37 police vehicles through the Vehicle Replacement Fund. COVID-19 impacts, we were unable to replace 35 fleet vehicles due to funding, again, deferring that to a later date, and delay in receiving parts due to manufacturers being closed. As you all know, the General Motors manufacturing facilities, a lot of them were closed this year due to the strike, as well as COVID-19 issues. Financial highlights, operating proposed budget, personnel benefits, 1.1 million, operating and maintenance, 136,677, and we have a FTE of 12. Again, that 12 is heavily burdened with the 1,224 vehicles and equipment. General fund, 1.2 million, and again, the department is funded 100% by the general fund. And there are no ongoing one-time decision packages.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Mike. Airport, Chris.
Mayor and council, thank you. It's been a very interesting year in the airport industry. Didn't start out that way, but we'll see how we finish. During the last fiscal year, we completed 2 very critical pavement projects, and in airport world, most of our activity is spent on pavement, because that's our mission critical infrastructure. So pleased to report we completed our terminal apron rehabilitation, phase 1, which is our Grand Central Station pavement. We will get at least 20 and probably in excess of 25 years of integrity out of that apron. We only want to do that once every so often. And we also completed our pavement maintenance on the south runway, which was a crack seal and overlay, which I'm pleased to report was the first project of our pavement maintenance program. And in the midst of this, we also started our airport master plan update, which has been a very critical process and will help set the future for the airport for at least the next 10 years. The COVID-19 impacts, these 2 impacts are national, and our airport experienced to a lesser degree what major airports have in terms of decreased airport operations. It's predominantly hit us in terms of flight training. Not all businesses have been hit equally, but we've seen an overall decrease of aircraft operations. And that can be expected, impacted airport businesses. They've either temporarily suspended their activity, cut back their hours, drastically reduced activity. So we're as a general aviation airport, we have weathered the storms better than the major airports, but time will tell. So, for our operating budget, we do have 1.1 million, and you can see by the numbers, it's roughly evenly split between personnel and benefits and operations and maintenance. The operations and maintenance also includes around $200,000 for fuel sales in terms of the budget. So that's when we can purchase fuel and turn around and resell it. But we're roughly about 50-50 with 6 full-time employees. And would like to say, as I talk to my fellow airport managers, as they go to skeleton crews for the general aviation airports, I ask them, what's your skeleton crew? 6. So they are operating at a skeleton crew that is Chandler Airport's full-time crew. And so we certainly are punching above our weight, and very, very pleased to work with a fine group of individuals. Funding comes from the airport operating fund, and we have 2 decision packages that we're bringing forward. First is a heavy-duty mower. The picture you see in front of you is not the actual mower, it is a picture of a mower. What we're looking at is a heavier-duty commercial-grade mower. That helps us maintain our airfield with precision cuts around lights and fixtures that need to be taken care of, and they happen to be out in the airfield. And also a conference room technology upgrade. We'll get into that. That's taking our conference room from essentially a room that had with a projector to the next level of having computer interaction, video, which we certainly found out in the last 7 weeks. What we thought going into it would be a nice service enhancement has essentially become the new table and chairs of a conference room, because we're finding a lot of our partners are going online, and they're having a lot of teleconferences, and this is going to be the new normal. So I think the timing, unfortunately, is going to work out. And then the heavy-duty mower and the conference room technology upgrade, we're looking at about $43,000 for the one time to get them going. As we move into the CIP projects, what I'd like to say is we are very reliant on FAA and ADOT funding, capital funding for these projects. The good news is the FAA typically contributes a little over 90% of funding for eligible airport projects. ADOT can contribute anywhere from 90% for state-funded projects, or they'll kick in an additional 5% for the federal match. So what that boils down to is the city's share ranges between 5 and 10% for every eligible capital project. So it's an excellent return on the city's investment. Talk briefly about the projects. We did get a grant to rehabilitate Taxiway Charlie, which is our southernmost taxiway. We started the kickoff, and ADOT is very supportive of us in getting that done. The picture in the middle, that is a precision approach path indicator. So we have to upgrade our airfield lighting as well as replace some of these critical navigational aids. And also we've added the wildlife exclusion perimeter fence. We currently have a chain link fence around the property that actually goes right down to the dirt. And we have several neighbors, coyotes and the occasional javelina, that dig under the fence and go to places that we don't want them to go. So part of this will be a federally funded project to help us have a deeper fence that goes below grade to help keep the critters out of the airfield. So our goal is to keep the animals out and not on our airfield. We've got three projects, and these are local funded. Heliport lighting replacement. It's time to upgrade our heliport lighting. We're actually going to reduce the tall poles to ground level lighting. That helps for 2 reasons. We don't need to hire a contractor or have the expense to have somebody go up on a crane to change out lights. We can service them on the ground. And also the lighting replacement will also help us solve some electrical challenges. So we'll also replace that lighting with LED lights, and so it'll be a much more effective project. Middle picture is a electrical panel for one of our hangars. Of our city-owned hangars, the electrics were installed in 1985 when the hangars were built, and it's time to rewire the hangars to reduce our operating expenses, but also increase the customer service experience. And also we have our annual pavement maintenance project. which is budgeted at $100,000 a year. The next three projects, these are all pavement. Unfortunately, there's really no way to have a different shot of pavement. It's asphalt. So a lot of these projects are federal and state funded. And again, the expectation is that not all of these projects will be done at the same time. What we do is we submit lists to the FAA and ADOT, and they essentially choose what projects they can afford to fund as part of their program. So we're just ready to accept any federal funds as they become available, and we're in close contact with both federal and state partners to see what they're willing to fund. I have 3 additional projects, a control tower equipment assessment. Unlike other airports, Chandler owns and maintains the air traffic control tower. So a lot of that equipment that at another airport would be provided by the FAA, that is owned by us and maintained by us. And a lot of the equipment is of advanced years, and so we're having a CIP project for a capital plan to give us a list of the equipment and a schedule for replacement. We're also looking at a head wall reconstruction, example right there, $150,000 fix to lower the head walls and improve drainage. And also eventually a north terminal apron reconstruction, phase 2. We're also looking at an environmental assessment for the Santan apron. We need to do that in advance of a pavement project simply because the Santan apron is over an environmental site. And so the pavement has to be an environmental cap. And so unfortunately we have to go through a few more hoops to make sure that that's done. Last but not least, and I apologize for the picture, airport plumbing renovation. Our bathrooms are fine. It's the pipes that come out of those rooms and go out to the sewer main. I can tell you when the weather gets hot and occasionally we have incidents in the bathroom, we have a very sensitive plumbing system and we need to get that fixed because it's really not the customer service experience we want to have. So that's a mission critical sewer line fix for us. And that's the public restrooms in the terminal.
Council, any questions? Councilmember
I
McClymons,
just have
then
one
Vice
small,
Mayor.
small question. Let's see if I can properly articulate this. The heliport lighting replacement, I was just curious, the heliport, how many entities / companies, individuals would you say utilize different on an annual basis, the heliport?
Specifically for the heliport? Mayor, council member. So we have a major airport tenant, Quantum Helicopters. That is probably the overwhelming majority of use for the heliport. However, that said, as an example, Quantum has been down for the entire month of April. We are still getting a lot of helicopter activity, predominantly medevac. Occasionally we will get City of Mesa helicopters, DPS, police helicopters, and occasionally military helicopters. So I would say the overwhelming majority of the use is an airport tenant, but it is a mission critical facility for the public health services and the military. And so by reducing those poles, helicopters obviously can maneuver around them without a problem. It definitely meets standards. But if we can reduce those poles to ground fixtures, replace them with LED lights, and also correct some electrical wiring issues, it's a much better operating environment for anybody who uses the heliport.
Okay. Okay, thanks, sir.
Vice Mayor.
On the ongoing, on the ongoing one-time for the conference room upgrade, can you explain a little bit about the 1,160 ongoing for that? I can understand 3,600 to do the upgrade, but why would we need 1,100 on an annual basis for that?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, that is per the city's formula for the IT budget, that is the annual allocation to support that type of infrastructure. So that came through the policy of computer replenishments, and so that includes the upgrade. So that's the fully loaded rate. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as buying a laptop.
ask that question further when we get the IT Cindy book here. So, okay, thank you.
Your operational budget.
Mayor, council member, our annual revenue does not cover our operating expenses, nor
How
our
much is
capital.
the difference?
Approximately, Mayor, council member, approximately annual average of about 250,000. Some years it can be more, some it can be less. What I would also say is that it is not very common for general aviation airports to completely cover their operating costs. The number of airports, GA airports, that actually do that, as a percentage of all the airports in the country, is actually very few. And certainly most cannot cover capital costs, which is why they're heavily reliant on FAA and state DOT grants.
Mayor,
Councilmember Stewart.
can you tell me what this next year, so I'm seeing 3-year totals with an asterisk, and I'm seeing, the mower. But these SIP programs, is this all part of that? And you may have said this already. Is this all part of that project that we're doing that possibly is going to extend the runway? Or is this to get set up to do that? Or how much of this is being subsidized? It's some of it's operating and some of it's grants. How much is the taxpayer subsidizing on these 3-year SIP?
So Mayor, council member, it depends on what taxpayer you're talking about. So for the pilots that pay into the federal system, of which federal airport grants are dispensed, 100%. For City of Chandler taxpayers, it's generally between 5% and 10% of a capital project. So for example, Mayor, council members, so that particular project is 100% locally funded. And the reason is there's the FAA and ADOT have a list of projects, and they rank their projects on a national and a state scale of what they will fund. And there's a lot of projects that, while they may be eligible, would never score enough points on either agency's list to ever be eligible for funding. So generally what happens for airports, the smaller, more modest amounts, roughly speaking, 100, 200, 300, those typically are locally paid for. And when you get into the millions, for most airports, that they rely on state and federal grants. So in that case, for the heliport, that would be local money.
Okay.
Good, almost afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks for hearing the presentation for the transportation policy budget. Last year, we completed the Transportation Master Plan, which we visited in front of you many times. It's a citywide effort that included a lot of different departments, and my thanks goes out to each one of those entities, John's group, Derek's group, a number of other folks within the city that helped us accomplish that Transportation Master Plan, which will set us up for the next 10 to 20 years of long-range transportation planning here in the city of Chandler. We were also awarded $5.8 million in federal grants, as well as $3 million in regional funds to provide resources to us for a number of projects that include bike lanes, street sweepers, alley paving, as well as Alma School Road and a Fry Lane protected bike lane project. We completed downtown ADA improvements for phase 1. This included enhanced sidewalks, curb ramps, and crosswalks in the downtown area. And regional grant funds were used to enhance bus stops and make ADA improvements at the transit center. It's no secret, the COVID-19 has been affecting transit operations. It's down significantly, and it's something that regionally everyone's looking at. And it's our express bus routes and our local bus routes and paratransit, you name it, it's been hit by COVID. And I know Mayor Harkey chairs the RPTA board, and they're constantly looking at that, at least weekly, on how that service impact looks to not only the riders, but also the Valley Metro entity. Fortunately, CARES Act funding will be provided to offset some of the revenue impact from that, but we just don't know what that looks like yet. We do know the region received about $188 million, and then some of that will be apportioned to East Valley operations, but how that trickles down to our budget, we're not quite sure what that looks like yet. I also want to note that at all of our bus stops, we've added a lot more cleaning, sanitation. We've done some bus fogging. Valley Metro is actively engaged in making sure that the spread of COVID is not attributed to transit services as best they can. We're a department of 3. We're personnel and benefits of $406,000, operations and maintenance of $3.6 million. It should be noted that the majority of our budget, as far as service, actually is regionally funded. So the majority of service on the street is provided from the region. 30% of our budget is LTAF, which are lottery monies. That's specifically directed to only spend on these type of operations. And then the rest of that is general funded. Your budget decision packages can be found on page 56 and 57, and then the CIP on page 60. So we're asking for ongoing decision package of paratransit and ride choice of $315,000, as well as fixed route of $52,000 for ongoing, and this should cover the majority of the service that we provide in case of cost overruns and things like that occur, as we expect to look at paratransit ridership going up. It has been trending up over the last couple of years. If you recall, last fall, we visited with you on some of the strategies that we're employing to try to reduce those costs and shift people over to ride choice, which is a cheaper program. But the issue is we still need a plan for potential contractor cost increases. That includes fixed route bus as well. One-time decision packages, first mile, last mile pilot. Some of you on a subcommittee may have heard this presentation last year. This is a pilot project that we wanted to initiate to try to find a cheaper way to provide service to South Chandler. We had some issues negotiating the contract, and then COVID hit right when we're getting close to striking a deal. So we decided to pull back on that project while we're evaluating COVID. But however, we want to move forward with potentially engaging in a new pilot next year or next fiscal year should this situation start to alleviate. But this decision package also includes one-time funding for, sorry, getting tripped up. The shared mobility program, which we launched earlier this year. Again, COVID had an effect on shared mobility providers. And so while we have been engaged with a number of providers, they've ultimately pulled back across the globe, and especially here in the region on deploying their resources. But this decision package authorizes us to engage with the contractor to make sure we have compliance with the shared mobility pilot program, and it should be 100% offset by the fees received from the shared mobility providers should they engage with the city of Chandler to do business. If they don't, then we don't spend this money. And then $10,000 is a fixed route bus contingency fund in case costs come in higher. And then the LTAF, one-time decision package for paratransit and ride choice, should those contractor costs come in higher as well. As far as our CIP, bus stop and bus pullouts, this is a request to continue to fund bus stop improvements and cover 40 parking spaces at Chandler Park and Ride. This project will utilize state lottery proceeds. ADA upgrades at CIP, this request extends an annual $500,000 for ADA improvements for 2 additional years and increases to $600,000 in beginning in FY 22-23. In 2021, the funds will be utilized to complete the downtown ADA improvements that I referenced phase 1 of earlier, and this will implement phase 2. And then on Fry Road protected bike lanes, as well as Price Ocotillo, a separated planning study. Both these are matching. The city of Chandler is receiving grants to fund these projects, but we have to provide a local match for them. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Vice Mayor.
So with the COVID impacts, I mean, the number of reduction of the ridership, especially on the, like you said, the express route that we run from, it's the Tumbleweed one, right, that we run to downtown. I think a 90% drop is what you said there. Are we still running at the capacity we had before? Have we pulled back the number of trips? And then kind of following question on that, are we evaluating then on pulling back again to a lower level of, since we have a lower level of ridership, are we pulling back and kind of saving some of our money so that we're not running empty buses? One, and then again, evaluating to reintroduce, because again, a lot of the expectation, I mean, out there is even with amongst the city, right? Now that a lot of people have gone remote, a lot of businesses are realizing they don't have to have 100% of their people in the office at all times. They can go ahead and do some variants, work from home and all that stuff. So we may have a new level set of transportation.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, that's 100% correct. The express route was probably hit the most significantly, and service has been reduced. That's part of a Valley Metro-wide effort to make sure the resources can be appropriately applied everywhere, and then service reductions match that. And so express route was reduced due to the lack of ridership, and then, but the option is still there for those riders that are commuting to downtown. Transit service overall is something that I think all of us are taking a great interest in seeing how the long-term effect of this is. We did notice a ridership increase during the last recession, so that's something we have to be sensitive to as folks are forced to no longer choose to ride a bus, but forced to ride a transit option. So, you know, trying to balance that with having a reliable service is something we take very, seriously.
Thank you.
So Vice Mayor, also, I is on the exec board for Valley Metro RPTA, where we are now meeting weekly into an exec session just to talk about these. We're somewhat, as Phoenix really makes changes with their system, we correspond, because if they're reducing their ride service, then obviously we do the same as it reaches us and where we ride into there. And a lot of that 90% too is part of our vulnerable population, our seniors and ever. And obviously they're not going as many places right now to senior centers or otherwise. So that'll be a curious thing to look at too, to see what the bounce back is with that. But you're right, might be a good time for the entire system to look at a reset as work and recreation changes here. Councilmember Huang.
This comment also related to airport. I understand transportation is we are spending more than the revenue, because this is a public service now. As a government, we probably are obligated to provide. I want to mention about airports that is that really an essential service the city should provide. You know, I'm very supporting of airport. Okay, don't get me wrong. I just feel like your annual revenue is less than our Chandler Center for the Arts. It bothers me a lot. And we know airports spend much more money from federal, from grant, from local. And so if that's not essential service for a city to provide, why do we want to keep you? Please don't get me wrong. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, So what would be some kind of economic benefit that we keep the airport? Or it looks like we need to have some kind of adjustment to keep the airport.
So Councilmember, one of the big benefits of the airport and what it has done traditionally in terms of an economic engine is that we have 9 square miles that has been predominantly an economic region rather than housing. And the amount of dollars that the FAA, this has been explored a few times in the past that I'm aware of, but the amount of dollars that FAA has put into the types of projects that are listed today, if we ever wanted to pursue a path of transforming this into something other than an airport, those dollars would have to be repaid and back to the FAA. So this has been we have looked at this a few times in the history of Chandler, but it has served as a powerful jobs region, where otherwise, if this was not there, this area would have probably historically turned into another housing. There would be nothing that would have stopped this from being another housing communities as opposed to an economic engine for our city. So its benefit is part of, because the airport is there, it enhances jobs rather than just houses around there. And the second part is it just has not proved to be economical for us to look back and say, let's do something different with this. If I missed anything on that, Mr. Andrews? So.
I would also add that for our last economic impact study, the airport generated a total of $109 million each year. So that should also be weighed from the cost of the actual enterprise to how much economic impact does it provide. So that most recent study was 2015 and used a lot of the post-recession data. So at the very least, the airport itself is an engine that generates a minimum of about $110 million.
Yeah, I made this comment to give you this opportunity to say those things. Thank you.
Anything else for Ryan?
Mayor? Thank you. Regarding the, do we have a number on the number of people that get on the bus and get off the bus in Chandler?
I don't have the number immediately available, but I can find out. Valley Metro, Mayor, they do keep track of overall ridership, and they try to track at per boardings, per location, per bus stop. And, you know, it's obviously, we're reliant on driver input and where the fares are collected. And so that is something that we try to track, but the accuracy can't be validated with 100% accuracy.
So, and maybe Mary, you know too, if ridership is dropped off the cliff, right? Especially for light rail, but that doesn't matter necessarily for Chandler, but bus ridership. I mean, this is you know, I think anybody can tell that on our surface streets, there's not many people riding our buses, but you know, they go through Gilbert, they go through Tempe, and I get it. Are we, and RTA, are they reducing that travel right now? Are they reducing those service levels? Are we getting, is the taxpayer getting refunded, or is that money still being collected and putting into a bucket, or do you know?
Mayor, council member, we pay based on actual service received. And so it's on a mileage basis and frequency of service. And so if we have revenue miles that are going and it's an empty bus, that's obviously an inefficient service. But if it's something that we make a regional or city decision to reduce service on a particular route, then our contractor costs will go down because we're not running as many miles.
So is that what your expectation is, that our contractor amount that's going to go down for this during this crisis?
Mayor, council member, I think there'll be a number of levers that'll be pulled, and how the CARES funding affects our contractor costs will be certainly an input that we look at, as well as overall vision for the transit system. We try to balance, you know, convenience, because if it's an unreliable system, it's even less desirable to ride, even though someone may actually have no other choice to get to the doctor, to get to, you know, their place of employment. So we can't make the pain so much that people don't want to ride it even if they have to. But we obviously need to be sensitive to budgets and not run something that's not getting utilized.
Sure. So if somebody could help me, I'd love to understand what that cost per capita is for Chandler, per ridership, like how much it costs to transport somebody through Chandler or from Chandler to their place of work, and how much the taxpayer is subsidizing that transit. The other thing I'm curious about is we're investing money into ADA, but we have paratransit vans that do curb service. Can you, and that is some general funds that are going into that. There's also some grants. I think at this time, if ridership is low, we have another vehicle for ADA to use or paratransit to use. Is that something we probably should push out to another year through the capital projects?
Mayor, Councilmember, which project are you talking about with the ADA? Because we have a number of projects that we do to improve our downtown and some of these outdated, outcoded, out of code compliance, ADA compliance.
The paratransit and ride choice? Oh, no, sorry. The Americans with the ADA upgrades is a $1.6 million general fund, but we use paratransit and ride choice.
Mayor, Councilmember, those are two different items. One is more of a construction related, so to make a curb ramp, on the sidewalk more compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the other one, the paratransit, is a service that moves people from point A to point B. And so one is, if you're walking on, if you're on the sidewalk and, trying to manage that along with getting to the bus or getting to the paratransit service, that they work one and the same.
Oh, so paratransit doesn't go door to door? I thought it went door to door.
It does.
Oh.
So I guess I'm.
No, this might be one of those rhetorical questions that I ask. I'm seeing some inconsistency in what we're spending money for, which is ADA, but the folks that are challenged are using paratransit. So what's the purpose of spending $1.6 million on bus stops if that's my question? But if it's necessary, we'll do it. I'm just trying to understand that. I'm just asking a question that I think.
Mayor, I think City Manager wanted to.
City Manager.
Maybe I'll give this a shot. So, Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, you are correct. The paratransit is door to door. That's ADA compliant and all of that. Exactly correct. What this capital project is ADA dollars to do construction of sidewalks, curb ramps, and it is not specific to bus stops. This is citywide in accordance with our plan that has been approved by council that we have to submit to the federal transportation folks. And if we don't continue to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and trying to move forward with some of these projects, they can withhold our federal dollars.
Totally get it.
So
because it's in the box. Sorry to interrupt you. It's in the box with bus pullouts and bus stops. My assumption that was because it was in this block that it was related to bus and transport specifically.
Yeah.
So
Mayor,
it probably just needs to be in a
council
yeah,
member.
I get it.
That's a good point.
Right.
It is, one is related to park and ride shade and things like that, but the other is specific to ADA improvements.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On that same subject, that is a project that's been going on for a number of years. And along the way, there's been some conversation about accelerating of that construction, trying to just get it done. So are we accelerating? Are we ahead of schedule? Or are we behind schedule? I mean, this is the type of discussion that is this truly something that could be pushed out for a whole year and we'd still be in good shape and roll forward after that?
Right. So, Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, that is a really good question. So the reason that I had put this with one that we might hold is because we do have, off the top of my head, I want to say about 150,000, 200,000 still remaining in that capital project that will be part of those carry forwards that Don talks about. And so we do have some money to start this next year. Projects that have been completed using these dollars most recently are the downtown ADA improvements here on, what street is that? Boston Street, and here by the senior center. So it is also not only construction, but in our facilities where we have to make changes for ADA purposes to provide programs or any of those things, that also comes out of here. So it is kind of a joint use across the city type of project for ADA. But again, we do have that plan that we have to follow. But in, to your question, we could, but at the next update of that plan, we would have to continue to explain, how long and all of that we're taking to get these things done. If I remember right, Leah, I don't know if you were involved in that original one. Off the top of my head, again, I think we had about $3.4 million, if I remember right, from 5-6 years ago, whenever that was, the ADA improvements across the city that were needed. And those of you that might have been on the council at that time, you may remember the discussion about spreading that out over a number of years, right? So that's what this capital project does, is continue to spread that out. So we have been spending those dollars, but we have not near accomplished what was 10, 15 years worth of work in just the last 5 years, if that helps you.
So we're on schedule or ahead of schedule? I mean,
I'd have to, let me go back and look at that, council member, and we'll report back to you on that, exactly where that is in comparison to our plan.
I would also like just to add to this is that I have had conversations with RPTA 2 city offsets. They're going to be one of the better financed groups through the CARES Act as a transportation group. And so I have bridged the question, and nobody's ready to commit yet to see is there, because again, they don't know what monies they're going to see, but we have asked about offsets back to city based on one of your questions there, Councilmember Stewart. Any other questions? Councilmember Stewart.
Is that is the 1.6 a toggle on, toggle off? I'm coining that phrase for the COVID, or is it in? It's in the budget. We're going at it.
Mayor, Councilmember, you talk about the 1.6 for the
Maybe
ADA
that's-
improvements?
Yeah, is that something that can be pulled if we get into dire straits, or is we're plowing ahead?
Mayor, Councilmember, unless we enter into an actual construction contract, which we haven't, then it's something that we toggle on, toggle off.
Ryan is correct on that, and I had already put that on the hold list.
Thank you.
So this contract with that's been doing these sidewalks, has that been a small business set aside or a large corporation doing it for us or what?
Mayor, Councilmember, I'd have to go back and look at who was awarded the contract, but it has been based on the standard bidding procedures.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious to see who's doing those contracts. Thanks.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you. Council, it is 12:06, and we are just one mere group, although it's the largest group behind our scheduled Public Works and Utilities. I'd suggest that if lunch is here, that we take a lunch break and then come back, and then add that to our afternoon. It's going to bring us closer to 4:30 rather than 3. Sorry, John.
John, I warned you yesterday.
If your questions warrant that, we can be here till midnight. I'm a betting man, and I'd say no, we're not.